Alrighty, we are live. Okay, so today I am joined by Mr. Acorn here, um, and he is going to go over some of my ideas surrounding objectivism as integrated with anarcho-capitalism. So I suppose before we get into that, do you want to give any background on who you are, what you're doing here?
Yeah, sure. I'm an anarcho-objectivist now, but I'll just give a hopefully brief rundown of like how I got here, because I've actually had a pretty similar experience to you, Zulu. So when I was young, I like had a deep desire for truth, and that sort of drew me towards philosophy. I've noticed for a long time that philosophy is, like you mentioned, really, really big, and there's tons of like contradicting schools and stuff. So I don't really know like which school to go into. So what I did for like most of my younger life is like I basically just thought about like pop philosophy questions and tried to solve them myself or something. And I became a feminist at around year 6, since most of my friends at the time were girls. And like feminism is sort of what got me interested in ethics as well. However, around 2 years ago, I realized that whilst I called myself a feminist, I didn't really understand what that meant. So that was when I started like doing research into feminism, and that was sort of my introduction to like the more political stuff, which was through the culture wars and stuff. I quickly realized that like feminism had a bunch of like faulty statistics and logical inconsistencies. So like not long after I began my research, I started to question feminism, and I eventually became an anti-feminist. So basically like I mainly learned about like feminist stuff from watching YouTube videos and like online articles and stuff. And since I became an anti-feminist, I was mainly in more right-leaning spaces, like with conservatives and stuff. However, I like to think about advance my own beliefs by like trying to think of counter-arguments to my own beliefs to iron out any inconsistencies. And that eventually led me to converge on the ideas of anarchism. So I started as basically sort of like a conservative, watching people like Jordan Peterson and stuff. But as I thought more about my ideas, I began to lean towards classical liberalism. I eventually discovered channels like SFO, Short Fat Attack, and Mentis Wave. And at that time, I think that was like around 1 year, like 1.5 years ago or something. And that was when I was calling myself a classical liberal. I actually didn't realize Mentis Wave was an anarchist at the time, and I mainly learned Austrian economics from him. He mainly makes a lot of more practical and like consequentialist videos. With SFO, two of his videos that really interested me were his videos Consent is Deontological, and also his video on healthcare is not a human right, which introduced me to the ideas of negative rights. So SFO's Consent is Deontological videos basically led me to reject consequentialism, since I was still big on consent from my feminist days. And both of those two YouTubers combined helped me understand that like positive right is basically slavery. And so that's when I started mainly thinking about negative rights and the ideas of John Locke. I basically applied negative rights consistently to everything. And I sort of made up like most of anarchist legal theory myself, how it just wasn't that concise. For example, like I realized that like taxation was basically non-consensual and it violated negative rights and stuff. So I realized that taxation was violation of negative rights and therefore wrong. However, like at that time I started thinking, wait, isn't this going towards anarchism? And I was like, oh no, not anarchism, because SFO poisoned the well on anarchism a lot. And actually these days he's like completely just anti-libertarian and just like, yeah. Back then he wasn't so bad, but he still poisoned the well on anarchism a lot. It wasn't until February 3rd of last year, 2024, when I discovered Zulu, your Socialism is Impossible video through the Mentis Wave collab. I found it interesting, so I clicked on the next video of yours, and that was the one that was on law. And when I finished that video, like everything just clicked into place. That was the moment when I finally realized I got the right philosophy. Like I knew at the time that I might have like changed my time sometime on some more peripheral issues. Like at that time I knew that like anarchism was just the one that was correct. Basically like, for a long time I needed a proper proof to ground my ethics and stuff. And praxeology was what gave me a more sophisticated definition of what negative liberty actually means. So, for example, I used to be a non-cognitivist, since I sort of figured out the problem of Hume's guillotine despite not knowing its name. But your video on law, it gave a proper proof on which to base my ethics. That was what convinced me of moral realism. I also used to be a utilitarian, or not necessarily utilitarian, but I guess a general consequentialist. So, but at the time, I did actually agree that even before I became an anarchist, I agreed that it's immoral to steal a candy to save the world, for example, because I was more of a rule utilitarian in that I thought that if everyone adhered to negative rights, that would maximize the utils and stuff. Since I knew that free trade and stuff and Austrian economics would grant the maximum benefits to everyone. So I was mainly looking at natural law, basically negative liberty, as a means to achieve the ends of utilitarianism. But after watching your videos, I now know how to justify this naturalistically. I actually used to be a Christian as well, but after discovering objectivism, I instantly became an atheist.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So that's the story of how I became an anarchist. It's basically a year ago, on February the 3rd. That's why I planned to originally do the live stream yesterday, since yesterday was my 1 year anniversary of becoming an anarchist.
Yes, but unfortunately I had to delay it by a day.
My introduction. Yeah, no worries. I've actually got some written some notes up to prompt me during the debate in case I had a brain fart or something, and hopefully I had something to remind myself to not embarrass myself on stream. And I wasn't properly finished with it tomorrow, so I don't really mind delaying it by a day.
Yeah, that's all right then. All right, so you have a number of sort of topics you want to go over under this sort of broad bubble. Do you have any sort of anywhere you want to jump in first of all?
I should probably give a disclaimer that I am not the best well-read objectivist or anarchist. My main source of knowledge is from your course, your brain notes. And also G's given me a bunch of resources for me to read over, and I've listened to some of Bingsbanger and Peacock's lectures. However, most of my knowledge is based on your notes and your course and some of G's notes as well. G's yesterday I had a conversation with G, and he's recommended me books by Bingsbanger and Picatero, but I haven't really had time to read through those before this debate. And also I'd like to point out that I don't actually disagree with you on any core issues. But as I said before, I like to find weaknesses in my own beliefs so I can iron them out. So a lot of my arguments today are going to be playing devil's advocate or just interrogating some anarcho-objectivist ideas, from anarcho-objectivist perspective.
For sure.
So the first topic I mentioned was concepts and definitions. And I was originally intending for this to just be an NAP stream. However, I realized I wasn't originally planning to go into epistemology. However, I realized that epistemology is pretty important in discussing ethics. So I don't want to go through all of epistemology at all. As I said, it's mainly concepts and definitions. And there's one thing that I actually only got clarity on recently, which was, for example, when I search Google's search for defined definition, what Google comes up with is a statement of the exact meaning of a word, especially in a dictionary. And I realized that even sometimes in your videos, you use it in this way, basically how in your most recent video, your explicit definition, which is the objectivist definition for what a definition actually is a statement that identifies the nature of a concept unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that's quite different from most people's idea of what a definition is. So I feel like most people, including me, when we think of definition, we think of it as a relation between, it's relating a word, the sound made by a word, to the concepts and the meaning of that concept. So I guess the way of explaining is that most people, when they say definition, they usually mean meaning of a word or something. And so I think like with your definition of definition as a statement that identifies the nature of a concept unit, you gave the example of the genus and the differentiator.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was just wondering, like, if definition means a statement that identifies the nature of a concept unit through the genus and differentiator, is there a separate terminology we can use of like how to relate a word to which definition? Sorry, to which concept it's referring to? Because a concept is you mentioned this in your brain note, how the language, like the importance of language in a conceptual being, and basically that like a concept is sort of like nebulous. You can't really like properly place a thought on it because it's sort of this thing that you create in your mind by abstracting out. However, you can concretize it or objectify it by giving it a word to associate with it. So I'm wondering if there's a terminology for like linking a word to a concept.
So like I would say that that's what definition is doing on objectivism. It's just that so like let's say we're trying to have this thing, this definition, which is relating a symbol, some sort of word or sound or whatever, to a concept. Well, that means it's going to be in some way pointing at the concept, but the concept itself on objectivism isn't up in like some platonic world of forms or whatever. So you can't point directly at the concept. You have to point at what the concept actually refers to, which is the relevant aspect shared by a number of particulars, the units of the concept, right? And that's where the objectivist definition of definition comes from. It is identifying the nature of a concept's units. Now, that is what definition means on a specific theory of concepts, which is obviously the objectivist theory of concepts. If you had some sort of other theory of concepts, like let's say you're a nominalist or something, then what would definition be on nominalism? It would be more like a linguistic contract. It's, hey, when I say the word man, I mean Socrates and Aristotle and Ben Shapiro and all these other sorts of people, right? It's just a group of particulars. And that's what, because that's what concepts are on nominalism, or on Platonism, where a definition would be a statement which directly identifies a concept, right? So I think the Google definition is sort of right in terms of a first level definition of definition. But after you have the correct theory of concepts, you can narrow that down further and explicate exactly what it means to point out a concept. Does that sort of make sense?
I guess. So I've heard of an analogy of how a concept is like a file folder, and like the different units of the concepts are sort of like the content inside the file folder. And in that case, the definition would be like the label on the file folder when you want to like try to find that file. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that analogy?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, so by using that analogy, basically like when watching your video that you uploaded a few days ago, I was actually worried that I was a nominalist at the start. But after like chatting with G, I think I'm certain now that I'm not quite a nominalist. But I'm not sure if there's any fundamental disagreements between us. But basically, my belief is that like if a concept is a file folder and the units are like the things contained inside the file folder, and the definition is like the word is like the label that you slap onto it. I think that what the like specific words that you choose for each concept, like the label that you put on any given file folder, is arbitrary. Like, I agree that like concepts are not arbitrary. I agree that like man is an actual concept. It doesn't just refer to like Socrates or this man or that man. It refers to like basically like with concepts, you abstract out the essentials of man, and then you integrate that together into a concept. So I agree that the concept is real, and the concept isn't just like arbitrary grouping togethers. However, I feel like the words, like the sounds that you make to put onto a concept, I don't think there's a way that can be right or wrong. So I guess in a way, like, I don't think there are objective definitions. If definitions is to mean like what word you put on a concept, and like to give an example, like in different languages, you know, like with the concept of water, like with water, you can abstract out the essential of what water means, and you can form a concept out of that. Like in English, you call it water. However, in Spanish, it's called aqua instead. So in Spanish, aqua, it refers to the same concept as water, even though it has a different word to it. Or like in Chinese, like the in Chinese word for man is 人. So even though it's a completely different sound from man, it still refers to the same thing. So in that sense, I don't think that there is a correct way of putting a word onto a concept. So what do you think of that? Like, is there a disagreement between us there?
So I think in the relevant aspect here, you're correct that they are arbitrary. I think to an extent, the symbol is non-arbitrary. Like there's, you wouldn't want a 50 letter word, a 50 phoneme word to denote a concept as simple as your father, right? You'd want something like papa, which is something a baby might say, right? Or there's the whole booba versus kiki thing, where booba is a rounder shape and kiki is a spikier one. And that all lines up quite well. So to an extent, the symbol is not arbitrary. There are sometimes better symbols than other ones. But in the context of this, yeah, you can pick any symbol. But I don't think that means that definitions are no longer objective. So yeah, you could pick whatever symbol you wanted to denote the concept man. It doesn't have to be literally man to do that. You could have all sorts of other things to do that. It could be gloop means man, and figloop means female or whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change a whole lot about the definition. All it does is swap out the symbol that you're using. But the genus and the differentia are still the same. You're still identifying the same structure. And, you know, that's how you can do like translations like this. You can look at like how they're actually using the words. You can look at, okay, well, I don't know exactly what that symbol means, but I can work it out based on the surrounding context, right? I mean, people do this all the time. If you come across a word you don't know, they'll teach you this in school quite a lot, is, well, how does it, what do you think it means based on the context? If I was saying, oh, Jonathan was a very great gloop, and, you know, I kept using the gloop instead of man, most people could work out, if they have enough examples, oh, he's talking about man, in the sense of a human male, not in the sense of the concept man, right? And you can do this for most things, because you can see how the concept is being employed to work out what concept it is that they're getting at. And they might even be explicit. They might even say gloop is the rational animal. And it's like, okay, well, clearly he's talking about man. He's just using a different symbol.
Yeah, I think that's like the source of like my confusion earlier about whether I was an objectivist on concepts or a nominalist. For example, like a lot of the things that you just said, basically, like if definition is to mean like identifying a concept's like essence by like the nature of the concept units through the genus as a differentiator, then I agree that like definitions are not like arbitrary. However, if definition is to mean like associating a symbol, like a word, with the concept itself, then I agree with like a lot of what you said for nominalism. For example, you said that nominalists think that concepts that isn't like a definition cannot be correct. It can only be convenient and inconvenient. So, for example, of like whether you say papa or like a 50-letter word, I don't think there's like an objective way of saying this is the correct label to use for it. It's just like a matter of convenience. And in that sense, yeah. So yeah, so that's why like, I got a bit of confusion over like whether I was a nominalist or not. Because a lot of what you criticize the nominalist for, I would agree if definition meant relating a word to a concept. So I feel like there should be like at least different terminology for what a word specifically, like what concepts a symbol refers to, like linking a symbol to a concept, as well as and a different terminology for relating a concept to its the the nature of its units by defining it through the genus and differentia. I feel like there should be two separate concepts for this. Another thing I should have added earlier is that, well, I think that like it's arbitrary, like which symbol you pick for a concept. I think the only rule is that you can't what's it called, equivocate. Basically, as long as there's no equivocation going on, it's fine. So if you specify like which label is on which concept, and the label and the concept match throughout the rest of the conversation. Like to give an example, like if in the video that you had, you said that you gave like a Peacock lecture where like socialists will say that like egoism is slavery and being compelled to be sacrificial is freedom. I think that if it's valid if you want to label the concept of egoism with the word slavery, and you want to label the concept of being compelled to be sacrificial as freedom. And then you can say that socialism is freedom and capitalism is slavery. However, in this case, slavery would actually be good and freedom would be bad, because slavery here basically just means egoism, and freedom here would mean compelled to be sacrificial. So it's sort of just like a translation with word change. And this would like not change the fact that capitalism is good, because under this definition, freedom would be bad and slavery would be good. So even though capitalism rests on slavery, capitalism would still be good. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Sure. So on that specifically, it's helpful to know like what Hegel's getting at. I took that from his history of philosophy. So some of the context is missing there. It's basically like Hegel is like the biggest, most extreme you can get in terms of collectivism. It is like, okay, they mean the same thing roughly when they're talking about egoism. It's being a selfish man. It's being somebody who's concerned with yourself above others. And they're saying that that entails slavery, because the true way to live is because you're like the cell in the collective body. You're not doing your proper role there. And that's like untoward for Hegel. It's so like there is more to unpack there. I'd have to go over some of my Hegel notes.
I think I get what you mean now. So like Hegel wasn't just defining it as like defining egoism as slavery or defining sacrifice as freedom. He's sort of like he has the same definitions as a sort of, however he identifies it wrongly.
Yeah. And that's sort of, that ties into the other part of what you're talking about there, where I don't think that the important part of, let's take just the paradigm example, man is the rational animal. The really important part of that, the part which definition really cares about if you're studying definition, isn't the symbol man. You can almost just ignore that in terms of definition, and just have definition. What you really care about is the rational animal. That's where you have genus and differentia. And then the part you put before that is just whatever symbol you're going to associate with this identification of the concept. Because if we go back to the definition of definition, it's a statement which identifies the nature of a concept's units. Now, is the rational animal, that's a statement which identifies the nature of a concept's units. It's a little bit incomplete as far as a sentence goes, because we haven't said what symbol we're assigning this statement to, but it still is that statement, right? That's the really, really important part for definitions.
Okay, so I guess like we completely agree on this point then. Like, the reason I thought this might be a problem in the first place is that in some of your previous streams, like there's been arguments over like semantics, basically, like over what words to put into this label. And the thing is, I think that when most people think of the word definition, then they mean what label is being used instead of what the identification of the nature of the concept's units is. Like, most people don't think of definition as relating like the nature of a concept's units. They think of it as relating a label to a concept. So like, for example, like I think in your there's a debate like a long time ago with Pogan, when you were arguing over the definition of coercive to determine if like capitalism is coercive or not. Like, if the debate proposition is just is capitalism coercive? Obviously, like, this debate is, for example, like, G sent me a lecture by Bingswanger, and Bingswanger in that lecture, he differentiates between a proposition and the sentence used to, like, communicate that proposition. And for example, with, like, capitalism is coercive. With this proposition, like, the sentence includes the word coercive, but what the proposition actually is depends on what the word coercive actually means. So if you guys don't agree with, like, what the word coercive means, basically, like, in that debate, I feel like you guys just debated a lot over what the word coercive means. And you said on multiple occasions that, like, coercive is aggressive, or what's to that extent, instead of just I basically feel like there wasn't more to you didn't really try to, like, how do I phrase this? You didn't really try to, like, communicate with him on what your idea of, like, coercive, like, what concept you're referring to when you say the word coercive, and he didn't do it either. So you guys were sort of just talking past each other. And I remember this happened, like, recently with a debate with Lego, your second debate with Lego. I think there was an argument over what contract means. And I think you said, like, multiple times in the debate that, like, a contract is a contract. And I think that, like, in that case, the miscommunication was between, like, yeah.
To be clear, I was saying that a contract is a contract about property, meaning that you can't have property theory first, because it's like how an objectivist would say consciousness is consciousness of something, right? To explicate why it's a stolen concept to have consciousness come first. So I believe, maybe I didn't, because I don't like or respect Lego at all. Maybe I didn't bother holding his hand through what a contract is. I believe I probably did talk about title transfer theory. But yeah, so in a case like Lego, I'm just going to focus on that one because it's more recent in my memory. In a case like that, I am not going to abide whatever word game he wants to play, because the guy is scum. He's going to try whatever fucking little weasel tactics he can use to get out of actually engaging in a debate. So I'm not gonna hold his hand through anything. I'm just gonna use the words as they have been used since the fucking Romans in jurisprudence. I'm gonna talk about contracts. I'm not gonna talk about whatever the fuck he wants to talk about. I'm just gonna use the words as every respected legal scholar would use them, and he can go ahead and I suppose cry about it or something. I think that's just the correct way to deal with these things.
So, okay, yeah, I can agree that, like, conceding these words isn't a good strategy, good, like, thing to do strategy-wise when arguing against, like, bad faith people. Like, you appeal to, like, historical definitions there, and, like, how, like, jurisprudence have often used the word. Like, in history, has contract always been referring to, like, the title theory transfer of contract? Because, like, you've mentioned that, like, a lot of legal philosophers today, they just say that, like, contract can mean, like, anything contract. Like, you can have contracts of, like, transfers of collective property if, like, people just agree to it. Like, I feel like a lot of people, like, use contracts to mean, oh, if people agree to it, then it's a contract. So, like, is it true that, like, in history since the Romans, contract has been title transfer?
As far as I can tell, don't quote me too heavily on this. I'm trying to get through. I asked Stefan Kinsella a while back for, like, a big reading list on the history of legal theory, which I'm trying to chip away at. As far as I can tell, like, contract, it's definitely not, like, so idiosyncratic that the Austrians are talking about title transfer theory. Like, that's not crazy out there in terms of theories of contract. There are, of course, other theories of contract, but they're all nonsense. So I think we can ignore them. But yeah, it's, even if you just, like, think about, like, the grug brain thing of what a contract is doing, and why it would arise in law in the first place, I think we can all understand why it wouldn't be illicit for me to say, Of course, man. I'll go to the pub with you after the game, and then me after the game saying, oh, you know what, I'm kind of tired. I'm just going to go home instead. Like, people understand that that's a promise, but that not every promise is a contract, right? There is no nobody would be thinking that I should be chained around my neck and brought out to the pub against my will. I mean, some people might, but that would be a quite strange belief to hold. So people understand that promise isn't the same thing as contract. But then the contract theory of property kind of relies on promise being the same thing as contract. So then what would contract actually be if promise isn't the same thing as contract? It would be like, okay, buddy, if the Chiefs win this game, I'll give you, I don't know, I think that's an American football team or something. If the Chiefs win this game, I'll give you $20. And then if I didn't follow through on that bet, if the Chiefs then won that game, I didn't follow through, people would understand why that's untoward, why I owe that guy money. The difference here is that in one case I'm transferring the title of property conditioned on the Chiefs winning the game, right? And that's how you get to, just like from first principles, how you get to contract theory, and the title transfer theory just falls right out of it, right?
Yeah, I plan to get to contract theory eventually, but I guess we're just like covering it early here.
Yeah.
Like the main reason I'm I wanted to do this like concepts and definitions in the first place. One is that like we can be on the same page of like a word can be anything, but like the concept, as long as the concept like refers to is the same. And also like I'm trying to convince some of my friends of anarcho-capitalism, and especially like with the concept of law. Like okay, so you know how let me just find your course. You know how on your course you define legal positivism to mean like legal positivism just means the belief that law isn't dependent on like jurisprudence or anything, or like whether something is justified or not. It's dependent on social facts. Yeah,
so I believe the definition I used there, I could go into the SEP to look it up real quick, but it's something along the lines of legal positivism is the thesis that law depends on social facts and not on its merits, i.e. it depends on, maybe we all come together and agree on it, or the king said so, or whatever. Those are like social facts, that it's made by man, it's posited by someone, and it's put as against the theory that it's on its merits, i.e. some sort of a natural law theory. I hold... I reject this based on the separation thesis. If people are wanting to look up some of these terms, the separation thesis is that there's some separation between law and morality. That law is this one thing, and morality is a different thing. And you could have it that you have more questions about what the law should be. I reject all sorts of quibbling about that, because I think if law means whatever the king says or whatever like that. If law is if legal positivism is accepted, I think law loses all meaning as a field of study. You're just arbitrarily studying what some guy says in Washington. Like, why do you care about what he says, right? Those are clearly just rules. We already have a word for that. Law is supposed to be something different. It's supposed to be about justice. It's supposed to be about what's right and wrong, what's criminal, what's not criminal. And these terms lose any significance to man's life, because everybody breaks the law every single day on legal positivism. These terms lose any significance to you unless you have natural law theory. And that's why I think natural law theory is just a much better way to go about it. It comes out from first principles if you're just studying conflicts, if you're just studying how the fact that men can come into conflicts and how do you deal with that problem.
Yeah, I completely agree with that fact. Actually, when I was young, like my mum often told me that like law is the baseline for morality, and when she said law, she means positive law. And at the time, I like completely rejected her on that. I was always like, yeah, law is completely separate from morality. Like, law is not the baseline for morality. There are plenty of moral things that aren't legal, and there's in mind was actually copyright law. Like, I actually wasn't fully against copyright at the time. I just haven't thought that much about it. but like even when I was younger, I sort of like understood that like when you like pirates a movie or something, like that isn't like violating the baseline of morality. Like it isn't like such a horrifying thing to do. However, like I feel like that's the understanding of what the word law means. Like if law just means like a lot of people understand the word law to represent the idea of whatever the state has decreed or something like that. And in that case, I don't think that if someone is a legal positivist in that sense, in that they believe that law basically means whatever the state has decreed, I don't think that's necessarily a challenge to natural law theory. Because if that's the case, then they're not actually making a normative proposition. They're just making descriptive like a descriptive statement on like what's what a jurist has said, or like what a state senator has said, or something like that. So it isn't necessarily like contradictory to anarchist legal theory, because anarchist legal theory, like when we say law, we mean the just winner of a given conflict. We mean a subset of ethics. So like, I was asking about this because like when I try to convince my friends of anarchist legal theory, and I just use the word law to mean whatever, like what we mean law to be, like the subset of ethics that studies praxeological conflicts. They like, I run into like a massive communication issue when like they think that when I say law, it just means whatever the state has said, and then they say, "Oh, clearly, like descriptively, you're just wrong." And for example, like, I remember like Fortbat said in your Discord channel once, or maybe it was on the stream or something. And by the way, I don't support Fortbat in any way. This is just something I saw. He asks the question like, with the statement, it is legal to sell cocaine in the UK. With that statement, is that statement true and false? Sorry, true or false? And I actually had this discussion with G yesterday, and he said that it was an invalid proposition. But I think that, like, with this proposition, like, if law is to mean whatever the state has said, then it is legal to sell cocaine in the UK would be false. But if law means natural law, it means a normative position on is it like a right? Is it like legal as in not a rights violation to sell cocaine in the UK? Then that statement would be true. Like it will be a different answer for whether it's true or false depending on the meaning of that word. And so like the word law can refer to different concepts in this case, and depends on what concepts it refers to, it will be a different proposition and still have a different truth value.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I would like to note on this though, that your average like normie is definitely not a consistent legal positivist. They're mostly legal positivist, but they package this together with legal authoritarianism, where they think it is in some way right that the government does these things. And you'll see this, I mean, right now, everybody's complaining about the illegal things. Elon Musk is illegally searching these databases to try and fire government employees. He's doing these things illegally, but it's like, whoa, buddy, he's part of the government. Can he do anything illegally? I didn't realize there were so many natural law theorists all about all of a sudden. Or you'll ask them something like, okay, how many Jews do you think were murdered in the Holocaust? They'll immediately think that you're trying to catch them out as some sort of Holocaust
denier.
Don't
get me started with this. I was going to tear my hair up because they kept making like you can always leave arguments.
Oh no! I was gonna go down the line of if you ask someone how many Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, and that wording is very specific, and they say 6 million, then you can just hit them with the German government in the Nuremberg trials, or the remnants of the German government, they were saying, but hold on, buddy, under German law, Jews didn't have any rights, so they can't be murdered. It's like, suddenly you got to have some sort of natural law argument coming in where, no, just because the government says it's okay to kill a bunch of Jews doesn't mean it's not murder. It's still murder, right? And that normally catches them off guard a little bit, because of course they don't want to say that 0 Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. And that would not be a good
like, as you said, a lot of these people are like really inconsistent with like liberal positivism. Like they sometimes say that like it's good because the government does it, and sometimes they say that like sometimes the government can like be wrong about the law or something, but they don't give any specifics on like there. I think this reminds me of what you said about like package deal statements or like floating abstractions and stuff about how like concepts to like a lot of people aren't really like sharp or in focus. It's just like something that is like passed from people to people without actually being thought of. It represents like a sort of floating just general meaning or idea instead of having a precise like definition to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is definitely related to that. In that most people who are talking about law, it's some big package deal where, yes, this is good because the government does it and because it's within with the things I want the government to do and enforce upon people, and then they can quickly switch to the other side of the package when they're saying like, oh no, I'm just using it descriptively, bro. You know.
I think this is probably a good place to jump to the main discussion on the NAP and stuff.
Sure.
So I think I said in the message that I wanted to go over the nature and justification of the NAP next. Okay, let me think how to word this. Okay, so my first point, sort of more of a question in that basically there's a lot of terms that are used in both your course and like other resources you have put out, like describing the NAP, and the use of a lot of different words. I'm just wondering like which words are used interchangeably and like the precise definitions of some of these words. For example, like aggression, illegal, rights violation, injustice. I feel like these mean roughly the same thing. And also there's like terms such as had property rights over versus its first comer to versus its owner of. So I'm just wondering like, are there any difference between these terms or words? Or are they like all referring to the same thing? And if they are referring to the exact same thing, what's the point of using different words for these ideas?
So like, let's take the first set you gave, because I wasn't quick enough to note down the second set.
Aggression, illegal, rights violation, and injustice.
Yes. So I think aggression specifically means the initiation of conflict. Now, is that illegal or not? Yeah. Well, we would first need to have some sort of non-aggression principle to tell us that aggression is illegal. So illegal is a broader concept. Illegal means that it's identified as being the bad thing by the legal theory, right? So a rights violation, that's basically, so long as your theory of law is based in rights, I don't know how you could have a theory of law not based in rights. Maybe it's possible. But that would be basically the same thing as this is illegal. It's violating rights. Unless you think that, I suppose you could have a theory of law where it's like, okay, well, there are certain rights, but sometimes those rights, you can violate them, under emergency circumstances or whatever. So then it would be a slightly different concept from illegal. Injustice, that's basically the same thing. As illegal. This is not a just. You could use it in different circumstances though. So like I could say this is not a just verdict, meaning they didn't come to the correct conclusion. Whereas I wouldn't say this is an illegal verdict necessarily, right?
Okay, I see. Can you like give a more like concise definition of what rights actually means? Like, does rights necessarily like by definition mean that it's a principle that always needs to be adhered to? Like, I'm a bit confused like over what the word rights mean, because you said earlier that like you think that it's possible to base a legal theory on like not on top of rights, which means that it can be distinct from law. So what does that mean?
So like I'm not sure I have any good general definition of rights, irrespective of legal theory. But within my legal theory, at least, a right is a conflict-avoiding norm, because every right is property right, right? So if I have a right to my water bottle, that is a conflict-avoiding norm. It's saying, okay, well, here's how we avoid conflicts over this water bottle, because I've already established, before I get to the rights theory, that avoiding conflicts is a good thing. So rights would accordingly be conflict-avoiding norms. Now, you might have a different sort of legal theory where rights are like duties that you've got to obey, right? Maybe the king has the right to tell you what to do. That means that he's bestowing some sort of duty onto you, right? That may be a sort of thing that you could have. Or, even more commonly, one might think, is like a right to healthcare. It means I'm owed this, where a right is something you're owed from somebody, from the universe, who knows, right? So rights can mean a whole lot of things. I'm not sure you could come up with a good general definition of rights, because it means so many different things, so many different people, and half of them are engaged in package dealing when they're talking about rights. So, I mean, maybe somebody can do it. I certainly haven't ever done it.
I just feel like the word rights is used a lot in your course, so sometimes it's a bit confusing when you use the words if it's not so clearly defined.
Yeah, so
it's like I said, multiple people people use it in so many different ways.
Yeah, so whenever I'm using it as to mean property rights, i.e. conflict avoiding norms. So if I've got a property in something, that means I'm the owner of it, which means I am the one who has the right to possess it, which means I have the right to control it, which means I am allowed to exclude people from it. These are all pointing at the same concept, but it's easier in some cases to use different terms than in other cases. Like, for instance, does ownership mean the right to possess a given good, or does it mean the right to control a given good? Well, they're the same thing, basically. They mean the same thing. The right to control is often a lot more clear in circumstances like, I let my friend sit on my couch. Is he in possession of my couch? Well, it's a sort of second order possession almost. So I'm still possessing it. I still have the right to possess it. I'm still allowed to control it, right? That's easier to see. And there are other instances where you want to define it in terms of exclusion, like with the donut homestead scenario. Talking about letting exclusion stand is very useful there. You're excluding people from the center of the donut, so you're controlling it, you're in possession of it, you initially possessed it, so you've already homesteaded that donut hole. And I also, I believe, use the exclusion terminology to ground my defense theory as well. But it all does point to the same concept.
Okay, so is this sort of like I remember an example you gave in one stream, which is how you said that the phrases let me think what it was. Let's say it is okay. Wait, it's something to do with epistemology and ethics being linked together. I think. But you said that was pointing towards different parts of the same statement. Basically, sorry. I think it was a statement of it is true that, let's say that X is true. X is true, and you should believe in X. I believe you said before that these are sort of pointing towards different parts of the same thing. Is it some similar thing here, where it's all these different words? It's sort of pointing to different parts of the NAP.
Yeah. And ultimately, the reason why you'd want to do this is because man isn't omniscient. I can't just give you, okay, here's what the primacy of existence means, and then suddenly you have a brain blast and you know all of objectivism from that point on, right? You need to explicate different points of the chain. Just because you there's the crow, right? There's the crow limit. You can't keep all of that information in your head at once. You need to denote different parts to sort of signpost it for yourself, if nothing else. right? And that's why it's useful to have multiple angles on the same concept. Otherwise, you could just say existence exists and be done with all of philosophy, right? But clearly that's not going to be enough.
Crow basically, the crow limit basically means like how many different concepts you can hold in your mind before it gets overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, I'd say more broadly, it's how many things you can focus on at the same time. So, because like it could be also like, how many dots on a screen are you able to keep track of? Or, and it comes from like a story of, a crow is like counting people walking past. He could keep in and out of a forest, and he can keep count of how many people there is. If like, if 3 people have walked past him, he could figure out that 3 are still in there, and 1 walks back out, he could figure out there's only 2 in there. But if 5,000 people walk through and 100 left, he'd have no fucking clue how many are left in the forest because he didn't have numbers, right? He's limited by what he can directly keep in mind.
Yeah. Okay. So I mostly understand this part now. All right. So earlier, when you said that rights are conflict avoiding norms. To break that down, like norms means like normative. Is that what norms mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around like what exactly the term conflict avoiding norms mean. Property rights are conflict avoiding norms.
Okay, so
like if this means, yeah, you go ahead.
So let's look at this in terms of genus and differentia. So rights are norms, that would be the genus. They are norms like anything else which is a norm. It's some sort of rule of conduct. It's what you should be doing, yada, yada, yada. Lots of different words you could use to describe that. But it's specifically in norms which avoid conflict. So it's going to be something like the NAP as applied to some circumstance. Now, why do I say that? The NAP just is the most general form of saying that you should avoid conflicts. It's just in every situation, all the time, avoid conflicts. Now, if I'm talking about that I have a right in my water bottle, I'm just applying the non-aggression principle to it. I'm saying, hey, we should avoid conflicts. Over my water bottle means, buddy, don't get any good ideas, don't get any wise ideas, and come over here and try and take my water bottle, right? That's what it's meaning. It's applying the most broad statement you can have of conflict avoidance to some specific item or some specific conflict or whatever.
I see now. Yeah, the genus and differentiate is a really good way to like understand the concepts. So like within the conceptual hierarchy, would rights be like a high level concept since you get to the NAP first, and rights are like an application of the NAP? Oh
yeah, and you don't even get to the NAP until you got like a bunch of other stuff. You don't get there until you've got ethics. You don't get there until you've got like free will. Like there's a whole lot of philosophy before legal theory.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So thank you very much. I think I understand that now. What else do I want to talk about? Yeah. So I guess another thing I want to ask is like, is there anything special about like the subset of ethics known as law when compared with any other subset of ethics? Because I feel like a lot of the times, sometimes you do this, and sometimes like often normally do this as well. But like a lot of the language that we use to talk about law, we say things like, it's not legal, so it's fine to do, or it's not illegal, so it's fine to do, or it's not illegal, so there's nothing you can do about it. And like I'm not accusing you of like not understanding this, but like basically like NAP isn't like all of ethics, obviously. However, sometimes we sort of like treat it. I don't think it's like intentional. I think it's more of an accidental language thing rather than like actually not understanding it. But like in the language that we use, we often say things like, well, this doesn't violate NAP, therefore it's fine. Then it's not necessarily fine. It can still be an unethical act. However, it's just not something that violates the NAP. And I feel like that, like, I don't think the NAP is like like or like the subset of law is really that special. Like I feel like it's just like ethics. Ethics tells you like how to act in a given scenario, like what you should do, how to live the good life, etc. And the NLP is basically just like, as you said, a subset of it. For example, with ethics is concerning like how you act, right? And basically, no matter what you do, anyone else can always act in non-aggressive ways against you in a response, right? Like if you call someone a mean name, they can call you a mean name back. Or even if you like do an aggression, like if you murder, someone can also call you a mean name. Like no matter what you do, anyone like doing non-aggressive things in response is always accepted within law. And NLP also states that you should not aggress. So, like any actions that are aggressions are wrong. However, if you do aggress, then like punishment opens up. So, like, and punishment in this case will be like I don't think punishment is technically aggression, right? So it's sort of like I guess you can call it like violence. When you violate NLP, people are justified in enacting violence against you back in punishment. However, this is all just ethics on like, okay, are you allowed to do this action to punish someone? Are you allowed to do this action of aggression? Are you allowed to do this action of non-aggression, etc.? I feel like it's just all ethics, but just like in a particular part of ethics. So, do you think there's anything like really special about law, or is it just like a regular ethics? A regular subset of like ethics?
Yeah. So, in the sense you're talking about it, there is nothing special. I don't think it's a different branch from ethics. Like I literally just think that everything in legal theory is also just within your ethical theory. It's just, what should I do in this situation given there is a conflict? What should I do about this conflict? What should I do about that conflict? Blah, 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 blah. There is another sense in which there is something kind of important, perhaps, about law, as against, what the area of ethics which studies, how I should go about painting my house or whatever. I suppose that would be more aesthetics than ethics. So it would be sort of like, I'm going to borrow a sort of mental diagram that Conrad Graf uses. I was very critical of Conrad in my course, but he is definitely, I like this part at least of his paper, where he's talking about how the non-aggression principle sort of gives you the boundary of ethical behavior, where anything outside of that boundary, that's a no-no, don't do that. But within that boundary, law as such isn't telling you anything about it. Law as such doesn't tell you anything beyond that's permitted, right? Anything outside of this boundary, it says that's not permissible. No, don't do it. That's and that you don't really get that anywhere else in other subsets of ethics. It's all very, I suppose you'd get it actually with any general ethical principle. But I mean, I suppose that there is this general ethical principle which regulates such a huge area of human conduct. You're interacting with humans a whole load of times, so there's a whole bunch of potential conflicts you get up. That's sort of why maybe law is so interesting and important to study, as against some random subset of ethics you might try and construct. I think I'm satisfied with that, is namely that it is giving you a general ethical principle which is doing this boundary thing, and it's also talking about a huge scope of human action, because in every action you might be getting into a conflict with someone.
I definitely agree that it's interesting how like law basically like it's a circle where outside of that circle everything's like not allowed. However, in that circle it doesn't say anything about it. I guess a question would be like, so this is like something that I do a lot, other people do a lot, I've seen you do it as well. Basically, like as I said earlier, saying things like it does not violate the NAP, so it's fine, or it does not violate the NAP, so there's nothing you can do about it. Like, I guess the meaning behind that is that it's not the NAP, therefore you can't use aggression or like use violence against them to solve the problem. However, like, it's not like, strictly speaking, it's not technically accurate that like if it doesn't violate NAP, then there's nothing you can do with it, because there's plenty of like non-aggressive ways that you can sort of call punishment. I guess you're punishing them in a sense. For example, with like Hopper's what's it called again? Like physical removal, or like basically like it's sort of like cancel culture, you know, like when you exclude them from like society. So, for example, if someone likes to torture puppies for fun, like that does not violate the NAP. However, it is also unethical to do. And the fact that it does not violate the NAP means that you cannot stop him from doing it. However, what you can do is like just disassociate from him with it. Like everyone in like shops can just agree, okay, food shops, we won't sell like puppy torturers food and just make him starve to death or move somewhere else or something like that. So I guess in a sense that like there are things that you can do about it, and you can sort of like punish illegal behavior in a way. But I'm just not too sure like how to like easily communicate that while getting that point across.
Yeah, it's that they're not treating law as a subset of ethics. They're treating law as ethics, as the whole end all and be all. Certainly some commie, hoodoo voodoo, anarcho-communist types do this. They'll be like, you're oppressing me, man. I don't want to take a shower. You know, that type. But there's also another sort which does it, which is the statist, where they'll say, you know, the government banned drugs, therefore drugs are bad. Or the government said you've got to pay your taxes, therefore you should pay your taxes. That sort of thing. Where if the government, I believe Bastiat even identified this attitude, where if the government prohibits something, that must mean the thing is bad. And if the government permits something, that must mean the thing is good. Which is, of course, a form of ethical authoritarianism.
Okay, that's not quite what I wanted to ask. Maybe I didn't phrase myself well enough. Let me try again. So basically, like, for example, take an example of like selling drugs. Basically, selling drugs and stuff does not violate the NAP. Like, so you can't like go in there with guns and like kidnap them and throw them in a cage or something like that. However, just because like selling drugs does not violate the NAP does not mean that selling drugs is a good thing. So, like, selling drugs is like, if you're selling stuff like cocaine and like stuff like that, like it's still unethical because you're like reducing like the time preference of people and stuff like that, and it's like degenerate society and stuff like that. I'm just wondering like, how I can like, is there a simpler way I can get across to people the fact that like I think that it's wrong for like people to go kidnap or aggress against drug dealers without like conveying the idea of like drug dealing is okay. For example, like some people say that like it's your right to deal drugs, and while I do agree with that, sometimes like people interpret that to mean it's your right to do drugs, meaning dealing drugs is good. I'm just wondering like how to is there enough way we can get across the message that like dealing drugs does not violate the NAP, it's not like a rights violation. However, at the same time, it's not good, and we don't endorse it. Like, I'm just wondering how to get that across.
Well, like, so me personally, I probably wouldn't bother, say, adding in, but I don't believe, just categorically in terms of strategy, I think that's a bad play, because it makes you look weak, and like, you're just, it's like the, what's his name? Jeb Bush, right? Where he's like, please clap. Like that's the energy I get from a lot of these people, where they start adding on asterisks to try and, you know, get ahead of any criticism which might come up. I am much more in the line of Albert J. Nock's essay, which is about reaching the remnant, where just say the thing. It's evil when the government goes in there and shoots someone in the head for dealing drugs. And, if people want to flounder and guffaw and get all, high and mighty about this, they can go ahead and scream about it. But the relevant people, they will be converted by that. And I only care about the relevant people in terms of strategy. Evidently, given your story today, it's definitely doing something. It's definitely working on people. You were intelligent. You understood what I was saying. I've been employing the strategy the whole time. I don't go around adding a bunch of asterisks and please don't hate me onto a bunch of things. Now, I mean, maybe if it's somebody really important who you want to be a little more tactful with, there are certain circumstances where that might be the play. Then I suppose just run the Bastiat line, where it's like, I believe he talks about this in the law. I assume so, at least. Where you're just like, hey, just because the government says that something is good doesn't mean it's good, and just because the government says something is bad doesn't mean it's bad. And like, hey, yeah, I think it's bad to shoot someone in the head for saying mean words to someone, but that doesn't mean that I'm okay with people saying mean words to others.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the remnant strategy, and I find it really fun as well. Just like other teenagers, are usually edgy teenagers online. They pretend to be Nazis or whatever, just trigger people. I do basically do the same thing, except I actually believe everything I say, and I can just say the most ridiculous stuff, and I can actually mean it. And more than that, I can just back it up with actual logic and argument. Although, yeah, you said, when I'm trying to convince people I care about, I should be more tactful. And I didn't quite do this when I first told my friends that I was anarchist. I was just like, yep, if you want to build a nuclear device in your backyard, and police just come in and shoot you or kidnap you and put you in a cage, that's wrong. You should be able to build a nuclear device in your backyard if you want to. And I think I can just say stuff with our punishment theory, it'll be wrong for let's say a police turns up and arrests a murderer. Basically, the terminology I would use is that they would kidnap a murderer and lock him in a cage. Mm-hmm. And some people get really triggered by that and say yeah, he's a murderer, of course he should be locked up and stuff like that. Or by our theory of dialogical unstoppable, that would be immoral, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really fun to be able to just say a bunch of these seemingly crazy stuff while it's just knowing that you are correct and there are arguments to back these stuff up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
however,
how
recently I have been trying to convince my friends. So,
well, I mean,
yeah.
That's obviously up to you. But I will say, for the most part, I don't think I think always, in fact, I am doing just the remnant thing of just saying what I believe and not really caring much. But yeah, I don't have a problem with somebody using tact.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the right balance, and in the right time to use it and stuff like that. I've not been a really tactful person. So, yeah. Okay. So let me just quickly check my notes. All right. So I think we can get over to different justifications for the NAP now. So I've noticed that you've given a lot of different justifications for the NAP, and I guess to start off, I want to try to summarize or list them out, the different ones, and figure out which one of them are essentially the same thing, and whether there's which ones are different, etc. So I'm gonna list some examples of the justifications for NAP that I've seen you do, and then I guess we can discuss if any of them are really the same thing or yeah, so like that. So the first one is like the objectivist justification, which is one that you like usually do now, which is like basically like there's NAP, there's mixed law, and there's law of the jungle. And then law of the jungle and mixed law fall into primacy of consciousness. But primacy of consciousness is false, and primacy of existence is true. Therefore, both of those fall, and therefore NAP. Mm-hmm. There's also argumentation ethics, which is there to argue against the NAP is to engage in a performative contradiction, and that would be false. So like the negation of that, which is the NAP, would be true. In your course, you also gave the contradiction of right skepticism, which basically is the idea that like if someone is a right skeptic, like they don't believe in rights, then what it means to have rights is also to have the right to enforce those rights. So enforcement is a part of those rights. So that if the right skeptic doesn't object to like enforcing your rights in self-defense, then the right skeptic doesn't really like object to his rights at all, because he's fine with you defending the rights. However, if the right skeptic is unhappy with you using like punishment or like using defensive force against any aggressors, then that's a contradiction, because they are automatically assigning rights to the opposer. So that's the third one. Okay, the later ones. I call in my notes. I called it split because I've seen you in some debates split the justification of the NAP into justification of self-ownership and then justification of homesteading, which is ownership in external means. And the way you do it is that like you justify self-ownership and then you justify homesteading, and that combines together to form the whole of the NAP. And so with the self-justification, I've noticed there's like two parts of the justification. So basically there's either basically like if besides universal ownership, besides the NAP, which is like everyone has self-ownership. There is either the communist ethic of like everyone owns everyone, or there's the arbitrary like some class like humans and subhumans, where the humans own the subhumans. So that's the two other possibilities besides self-ownership. And one of them, like the communist ethic of everyone owns everyone, is the death ethic, because under this property theory, no one would be allowed to do anything or act at all, because to act, they have to consult everyone. However, the act of consulting everyone is an action itself. Therefore, to actually, well, for starters, it's impossible to follow this because it's impossible not to act. Like you're always acting. Like choosing not to do something is itself an action, etc. So it's just impossible to follow. And if everyone does follow it, it just implies the death of humanity. So that falls. And also the other one with like humans and subhumans, it's an arbitrary class distinction. And because the nature of man is like the same for all men, so you can't arbitrarily like distinct between two classes. Mm-hmm. And so both of these falls, and that proves self-ownership. And the other part would be the external ownership. And I think for the external ownership, I've noticed two different justifications. So there's the mere possessor ethic justification. Basically says that like if the first comer does not own it, and instead like someone else can just come in here and take it, that means that the property right basically passes on alongside the property. So property is not distinct from ownership. And however, like when engaging in an aggression, both parties like assume that property and ownership are distinct, different, and that's a contradiction. So that falls. And the other justification, which I think is a different one, however, I'm not too sure, is basically that it justifies the first comer ethic in that if you were to assign it to the late comer instead, the late comer, well, there's only one first comer, but there can be infinite amounts of late comers, or like unlimited amount of late comers. So basically can't do anything with the property at all, because there's no point in time is there a time where like every late comer has come, because there can always be like further late comers. And so basically, like, if you accept the latecomer ethic, then that means that you just cannot homestead anything at all. And there's also like if someone arbitrarily goes between like first comer or late comer, like sometimes it's first comer, sometimes it's a later comer, etc. That'll just be an arbitrary ethic, and that'll fall afoul. So that also justifies the homesteading principle. And yeah, so that's the different arguments I've noticed. Can you give like your thoughts on like if you think like these are the same arguments or like different arguments, and basically like how many like different justifications for the NAP are there in total?
So like I would say I'll just start with the right skepticism argument. That is basically, in a way, it's an argument against the law of the jungle, because the jungle jurist is getting, he's like, oh, just fucking do whatever you want, makes right. That's a form of right skepticism. So what right skepticism does is it's just a defeater for somebody who says there is no such thing as rights, which is the law of the jungle. So that can be, I believe in certain forms I have included it in my current argument, which it's an argumentum e contrario. That's how I noted down in my notes, at least. So, and same thing with argumentation ethics. I have integrated that into my argumentum e contrario, specifically in the mixed law section. I mean, like, basically all of this, I have taken these arguments, the arguments I consider to be the best, and integrated the good parts from them into my e contrario. So specifically, the way I got to my e contrario is what you're noting as the split justification, where I have got self-ownership and then the justification of homesteading. That's from Murray Rothbard. That's Rothbard's argumentum e contrario, where he has self-ownership. It comes from the fact that you've got, apart from the NEP, you've either got the communist ethic or some sort of class-based ethic, but we're looking for an ethic for man, and neither of those can work. And then for the external position, because I didn't know at this point, I don't believe, that you can go from the NEP and you can derive homestead theory, I tried to, and also to be fair, Rothbard's argumentum e contrario, it does only establish self-ownership. It's not an e contrario for the non-aggression principle. And obviously, aside from self-ownership, there's external ownership. But there's plenty of writing on that. So the mere possessor ethic, that comes from Stephen Kinsella in his article, Thoughts on the Latecomer and Homesteading Ideas, or Why the Very Concept of Ownership, Homesteading Implies Only, something like that. Blah, 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 blah. It's a big fucking long title. And the thing about there can be infinite homecomers, infinite latecomers, I believe that's also in that Kinsella article, but I think he gets it from Hoppe, if I'm remembering correctly. So that was...
It's from Hoppe as well.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So like, that was basically the idea behind this one, is that Rothbard had already proven self-ownership. So I was like, okay, well, if we got self-ownership and external ownership, then we got the whole gamut. We got the whole shebang, right? But then at one point, Prax Ben was writing a book where he wanted a bunch of people to collaborate. The books didn't end up happening, unfortunately. But he wanted me to write a section on ethics. And I was like, okay, well, I want brand spanking new, hot off the press proof of the NEP. I don't want to just be eating what other people are saying. So I wanted an argumentum e contrario like Rothbard's, but instead of just going for self-ownership, I wanted to prove the whole thing right off the bat, which is how I got to my one. I was like, okay, well, what are the alternatives? We've got the non-aggression principle, or the law of the jungle, or something in between. And then I just thought about what these things would actually entail. And of course, because, as we all know now, the law of the jungle and mixed law, they both rely on the primacy of consciousness. So they're wrong. So we've only got one option left. Brilliant. Probably the next endeavor I'll go for is just more heavily tying the non-aggression principle into objectivism, because this is sort of like a negative demonstration of the NAP. I want a really, really solid positive demonstration of it as well. That would just, and I'll probably make one for the book I'm going to make eventually.
What do you mean by a negative demonstration of an NAP?
So like it's like I've identified all of the possible legal theories you could ever hope to have, and then I just knock down the alternatives and say, well, the only one left is the NAP. So I'm demonstrating the NAP, and this is what happens when you're doing e contrario, is you just knock out all of the alternatives. It's like I rolled a dice, I didn't roll a 1, I didn't roll a 2, I didn't roll a 3, blah, 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 blah. Therefore, I must have rolled a 6. Right? That's a negative demonstration, which, plenty of randroids will get pissed off that and accuse me of being a rationalist because of this. I think they're all very stupid, and they can't articulate what exactly is rationalist about it. It's literally just deductive reasoning. Argumentum e contrario does not mean rationalism.
I don't get that argument either.
Yeah, but I would like a positive demonstration as well. So it's like, hey, no matter which fucking way you come at this thing, you get to the NAP. So I will be coming up with a very solid, very good, positive demonstration of the NAP.
I don't understand like the fundamental difference between the positive and the negative, because like with the argumentum e contrario, after you've knocked out everything, you do end up with a positive statement that the NAP is true, right?
Yes, but I didn't. But I got there by negating the alternatives. So it's like, instead of a proof by contradiction, it's a proof by induction. Right? Something like that, if you're familiar with the mathematics terminology.
Okay,
yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I study mathematics at university right now.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, so I've written up some attempted criticism of your current like negative argument of the NAP. Like the purpose of this is to like try to see if there is indeed valid criticism at all, and like see if it can be improved. So yeah, I'm just gonna give it a shot and see how it goes. Okay, well, so the first thing I'm noticing is that what you define as let me just find my notes. Okay, so when you say jungle law, this is like based on your most recent video. You describe jungle law as initiate conflicts at your whim. And so basically right now, I don't quite understand the difference between jungle law on your definition and mixed law. Because I think that initiate conflicts at your whim is just another category of like mixed law. And it falls under, you know how in mixed law, you differentiate it between the class-based and the whim-based. This would just be another example of the whim-based mixed law. Because when you say initiate conflicts at your whim, it's basically like, it's not, it's basically saying it's all right to and it's you should initiate conflicts sometimes, and you shouldn't initiate conflicts sometimes. If you want to initiate conflicts, initiate it. If you're not interested in initiate conflicts for whatever reason, let's just say you're bored of initiating conflicts, then you don't. So I feel like a proper idea of like what a jungle law is to like complete the argumentum e contrario is that a jungle law would be always be aggressing. Like that would be like the complete negation of never aggress and sometimes aggress. That would be like always aggress.
So the reason why I phrase jungle law the way I do, I mean, I agree that always aggress is clearly nonsense. So the way I phrase it the way I do is because there's some people who just throw their arms up and it's like, who gives a shit? You know, might makes right, blah, 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 blah. Where they don't have like some specific theory like, no, might from the king is right, because he has the mandate of God or whatever. Or, no, it's okay when we all come together. Like, that's what I was envisioning as mixed law. I mean, yeah, I suppose you could interpret the law of the jungle meaning just go at it, do whatever you want, who cares, initiate conflicts at your whim. I believe there's a point in the same concept. You could interpret this as a form of the whim-based laws, which I talk about in my mixed law section, where it's a sort of personal version. But I think it is worth splitting it off into its own section of the proof still, because there's a lot to talk about on why is whim-based law incorrect. So I think it's worth having that groundwork already there. And then I can say, hey, half these mixed law systems, they're doing the same thing, right? Which is sort of I'm sort of saying the same thing as you. I'm saying like, hey, yeah, these mixed law systems are saying the same thing as, they're doing the same thing as the law of the jungle.
Yeah, so as you said, like, they're doing the same thing, these mixed law things are doing the same thing as the law of the jungle. So I guess I just don't understand the motivation of splitting it in the first place. If it is the same thing, it's got the same reputation, they're doing the same thing, so why split it if it's doing the same thing?
Because I don't want to just be stating this up at the head. I want to walk the reader through why this is the case. I want to walk them through, like, okay, well, here's a bunch of different mixed law systems. Here's a whole hog of them. And let's try and abstract out some general principles here. Well, these first set, they're all talking about this is good because I feel like it. Oops-a-daisies, that's doing the same thing as the law of the jungle, which we already know is false. And then the other set, they're talking about all this class-based stuff. That's false because of Rothbard's argument against that.
Okay, I think I see your point now. So basically, the jungle law here, which is initiate conflicts at your whim. So you're saying that it's basically an example of mixed law. So you agree with me on that point. However, you separate it out as an example of mixed law, of like the whim-based mixed law, and then you demonstrate how that one particular example is wrong. And then you can extrapolate that like this same argument applies to all the rest. And then after that, when you get to mixed law question, that's how you can like get rid of all the other mixed laws by just pointing out that all of these mixed laws, it falls into the same argument. Is that it?
Yeah, basically. Because I mean, imagine like the alternative. Imagine if instead of doing it that way, I mean, I'm just looking at the list of mixed law systems now. If I had to say, like, okay, well, consequentialism, here's why consequentialism is false, and that also applies to racism, and then that also, like, you know, I want to have the general form of it, which is the most extreme form, which is just, oh, might makes right, do whatever you want. If I get that most extreme form down, then I also get the more narrow forms.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean now. So basically, like, the might makes right, like the initiate conflicts that you're in thing. It's sort of like the, I guess you can compare it to concept formation, of which, like, it's like the one with the measurements omitted. It's like it doesn't have any specific king or like this arbitrary, like this person, etc., like this whim or something like that. Like the dictate of the imperial or something like that. It's like a more general whim. And then you can apply those to more specific whims in the next.
Yeah.
Is that your point?
Yeah.
Okay, so with this, you know how I said that earlier? I think that true jungle law would be always initiate conflicts. I don't think your argument refutes this. And I don't think that or it's obviously ridiculous, is an argument against it either. Do you agree with that point, that your current argument does not necessarily refute the ethic of you ought always aggress? Well, like, you ought always aggress if possible.
Well, like, okay, so let's think about what you should always be aggressing would mean. It would mean literally the instant you have won an aggression, literally the instant you've won some conflict, you are evil, you're Satan, no good. It's like, what would that, how could you even have that as a prescription? I think it still falls under jungle law. It's, might makes right, do what you want, who cares, right? It's who cares, just, you know, just go for it.
I don't think it is, because jungle law is based on Vim. It's basically like when you want to aggress. But jungle law, under your view, allows for non-aggression. It allows someone who just like, I just can't be bothered to get out of bed today. I'm just gonna lay in bed. Like that's allowed under jungle law.
Sure. Okay.
Like
but
in jungle law, it's like basically thing that.
Okay. So then, how would anybody ever follow the aggression principle? Literally, just always be aggressing. We could give them at the. I mean, can we? Because I mean, the non-aggression principle. You can follow the non-aggression principle if you're the only person on Earth, right? Or the only person around at the very least. That you'd be by default following it. I suppose you're not aggressing against anybody. So that is still held as being true. It's sort of strange to try and apply it there, but you're still following it. It's still a universal principle. But it would literally be impossible to follow the aggression principle if you killed off the last person. It's a norm which necessitates its own violation. And like that's even assuming you could somehow, up until that point, be like constantly like sliding a knife into one person whilst slashing another, and no gaps in between your aggressions. Like, I don't think this is a norm which you could possibly ever in a million years follow. I don't think anybody has ever followed the aggression principle or ever could follow it. Like, I think it's just an impossible norm.
I'm not arguing that like this norm is. I'm not trying to argue that this norm is true or something. Actually, I think that like a really easy argument against this would be argumentation ethics, and which we'll get into in a sec. But like argumentation ethics, just completely wipes out this norm, because the second that you stop to argue, you obviously like aren't aggressing anymore at that point.
Mm.
However, all I'm pointing out is that I don't think that your current argument encompasses this law, because it isn't like primacy of consciousness. It's not I aggress when I want to. It's that I must aggress. But okay, or like if you add like attack onto it, of if it's possible, right? It's like you know how like with ethics, something out of your control isn't like really in the space of ethics, right? So yeah, that's why you can like tack on the addition of like always aggress if possible. So like after you finish an aggression, you're not necessarily in breach of it while you're searching for the next target.
Well, so like I also do include argumentation ethics within my e contrario. Like I say, okay, well, I think I've covered every type of mixed law system. But just in case there's any that I've missed, let's go over argumentation ethics, where any conflict engendering norm is just simply not rational. It needs to be completely dropped from the flow. You can't even consider it for a second. And the aggression principle is definitely a conflict engendering norm. So it's strange, I suppose, that it's covered in the mixed law section, but I think it is still covered.
Actually, okay, so okay, if we're gonna go to argumentation ethics, I don't want to like spend too long on the argumentation ethics, because obviously you've done a lot on it before.
Mm-hmm.
There's mainly just one argument that I want to like run through and see if I can like get something different out of it. But I don't think argumentation ethics necessarily refutes mixed law. I think argumentation ethics, I think it definitely refutes like the law that I proposed, which was like the aggression principle, like always aggressive possible or something like that. I don't think it's possible by itself to refute mixed law. Okay, I guess I'll just jump straight into it. So I've seen this argument. I think it's maybe with Brewer Machine, or like I can't remember which debate it was from. I've seen someone debate against King Sisyphus with this argument as well, or something similar. But this is my version of the argument. So let's take the example of like a parent proposing to a child that the child ought sleep. Is a parent engaged in a performative contradiction?
Hold on, I'm just writing it down. So, I don't think that this is argumentation ethics as such. Maybe I've changed my mind on this. I don't know if I have. but it's at least my position now that argumentation ethics very specifically applies to disputes. Namely, are you rationally disputing this, or are you fighting over it? It's that sort of choice. So I don't think that... Let's just take the case of a parent proposing the child. I don't think they're either rationally convinced... It's specifically that they are...
It's an argument, right?
Okay, yeah. It's specifically that they are rationally proposing it as against beating the child until they fall asleep. Right? That's the important aspect of it. So, argumentation ethics, it's not saying always be arguing. You should argue under any circumstance. It's saying instead of fighting over it, you should be arguing over it.
So, the negation of... So, an example you gave in your course, I think, was the, like, people ought to never argue thing, right? Do you still stand by that example of argumentation ethics?
Probably. I mean, it's been a while since I've done anything on argumentation ethics, so probably I'm right.
So that example is basically that if you try to argue that people ought never argue, the act of proposing that people never argue is itself an argument. So it's a performative contradiction to argue people ought never argue. And the negation of people ought never argue is people ought sometimes argue. So the result you get out of this isn't that people always ought to be arguing. It's that people ought sometimes, at least sometimes, argue. Since that's the negation of people ought never argue. However, with the aggression thing, the proposition is like the non-aggression principle. So if someone rejects the non-aggression principle, the negation of people ought never aggress. It's not like people ought always aggress. It's people ought sometimes aggress, right? Like if you negate the non-aggression principle, it's that people ought at least sometimes aggress, which includes a mixed law system. So I don't think it's contradicting a mixed law system, which includes like some people like gave examples such as like maybe you should only aggress in the instance of it maximizing the util, for example, like for example this. I don't think it's a performative contradiction necessarily for someone to propose it's only justified to aggress in the case of it being able to maximize utils, because they can just argue currently when I'm having this conversation, yes, I am choosing to discuss it. I'm choosing to argue over aggression. But the reason I'm choosing to argue over aggression is because this is a case where arguing would maximize the utils and aggression would not maximize the utils. But in another circumstance, like a circumstance when they think they are, they might maximize the utils by, let's say, punching someone would maximize the utils. Let's say everyone would enjoy seeing this person being punched. In that case, they would stop arguing and they would just punch that person because it will maximize utils. So I don't think that in the case of them trying to argue that it's justified to aggress in the case of it will maximize utils, I don't think that's necessarily a performative contradiction, since like they can put a condition onto it. I do think that this is still wrong though, but I think that the wrongness of this part is that you need to use arguments that like this would be an arbitrary ethic. You are arbitrarily deciding like, okay, in these special circumstances, for whatever reason, we should aggress. That would be like, I think the best argument against mixed law would be the primacy of existence, like the objectivist argument. Because once you're trying to argue that, like, some instance, yeah.
So to be clear, I think that argumentation ethics is redundant in my proof. I just have it there. Just because I can't think of literally every single mixed law system anybody might come up with. I do think that I've identified them all and demolished them all. I believe I say this in the paper, in fact. But I would like to point out that argumentation ethics does already address that sort of oh, well, I'll argue here, but I won't argue later type of thing, where it is arbitrarily particularizing, is, I believe, a phrase Hobbes himself uses in these circumstances, where you are, because like a proposition doesn't you don't have these moral claims, these moral principles, where it's suddenly true inside of an argument but false outside of an argument. That doesn't really happen. So they would need something extra to show how it could happen in the case of this thing. And I think it's quite clear that these people are just being hypocrites. And a good definition of being a hypocrite is holding a contradiction. They clearly want to be rationally convincing people. But then they're saying, oh no, of course I don't have to rationally convince anyone. I just want to beat them. So I think argumentation ethics still does annihilate these people. But again, it's been very long since I've gone over my argumentation ethics notes. Maybe I could find somewhere else where I've addressed this, but I don't really focus a whole lot on argumentation ethics these days, so I'm not up to date on it.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I guess we can pass over this, but like my main point is that like argumentations ethics, I don't think actually refutes mixed law if they are consistent with it, because I think they can be consistent with it elsewhere because it's mixed. I think it absolutely destroys like the aggression principle of always be aggressing, because it doesn't particularize. But yeah, I agree that like argumentation ethics can prove the NAP if you combine it with the fact that like any mixed law is arbitrarily particularizing. But I think it's the arbitrarily particularizing part. I think that's the part that like defeats mixed law instead of necessarily like just solely the argumentation ethics itself. We can pass through this since you it's been a while since you did this and you don't have the notes currently. The other argument I wanted to address is wait, let me find it. So you know the argument where is it? Let's skip to it. Oh yeah, the mere possessor ethic. So maybe I'm just being a bit like autistic with this right now, but so I don't think the mere possessor ethic is the same as the law of the jungle. So look, at least in your definition. So the law of the jungle is like basically like right skeptic, right? Like aggress whenever you want. The mere possessor ethic is that possession and ownership is the same thing. So yeah, like even in your video, you said that like mere possessor ethic is when someone assumes that possession and ownership is the same thing. But like, what does ownership mean? Ownership means justified possession, which means if you own something, that means that you have to you are correct. You are the correct director of that scarce resource, right? So if someone does actually believe in the mere possessor ethic, if someone does believe that possession is not distinct from ownership, that whoever possesses a given item is the just owner of it, I think that that's really, really similar to the NAP, with the difference being punishment theory and it's like restitution and retribution. So, for example, I think that let's say that everyone just appears on the world today, like basically like no resource has been homesteaded yet. Actually, let's just take the example of a desert island. Let's say some people are dropped on a desert island, which has not been homesteaded yet. If every one of these people always abide by the mere possessor ethic, I think that it would turn out no different than if the NAP was true. Because this is basically homesteading, right? Homesteading is when you are the first one to take something out of the state of nature, right? When you are the first owner of something. Wait, first possessor of something, sorry. So let's say that Crusoe takes a branch off a tree. He would be the first possessor of that thing. But if everyone agrees that possession is the same as ownership, then they would all agree that Crusoe is the rightful owner of that stick. So it's basically homestead principle. So if in a situation, if everyone agrees to the mere possessor ethic, it will turn out no different under NAP. The only problem occurs when like someone does digress by not abiding by the mere possessor ethic, because obviously possession is ownership. So they violated ownership and taken it. By the mere possessor, no one's allowed to take it back because the person who took it now has a new ownership claim. But I think that like it's possible for the like the mere possessor, if everyone follows it, without any aggression. There would not be any further aggression, if everyone follows the mere possessor ethic.
So
do you agree?
I think this is sort of pointing at the fact that ownership is kind of meaningless on the mere possessor ethic, where ownership has to be held as distinct. Because of course, none of these people nobody actually goes around saying this. They say, "Hey, I took it, so I get to have it." And of course, if somebody else tried to take it from them, they'd start crying. Suddenly, they'd have a revelation about how they're a natural law theorist now. That's sort of what Kinsella is getting at with his article. And it's moreover, because in literally every single conflict, this is like the key point, literally every conflict anybody has ever, they have to presume that ownership is different to possession. But on the law of the jungle, specifically the might makes right form of it, you have it that possession is ownership, where if I'm able to take something off of you, I own it. I was right to do that because it's mine. So it is simultaneously holding a position that possession is different to ownership and possession is the same as ownership. That's the problem with the mere possessor ethic, and that's the connection it has to the law of the jungle. Is might makes right is the mere possessor ethic.
I think that this argument is refuting something, but I don't think it's refuting either the jungle ethic of aggress whenever. Oh, sorry, it's a right skeptic, basically jungle ethic. I don't think it's refuting that specifically, and I don't think it's refuting a consistent mere possessor ethic either. So I get the spirit of the argument, but I think technically, on a technical level, it doesn't refute either of these two things. Like what you said about like how if someone says, I can take it from someone and then it's mine now, like taking it grants me the ownership right, and no one can take it from me. I don't think that counts as either the jungle ethic or the mere possessor ethic. Let's take the mere possessor ethic for starters. If someone is actually consistent on the mere possessor ethic, they will not take something from someone else, because to take it from someone else means that someone else already possesses it, right? And someone else possessing it means that they own it following this logic. Which means that if they own it, you should not be taking it from them because they have the just direction of it. So I don't think this is technically the mere possessor ethic. If it's just, okay, I can take it, but no one else can take it from me. It's random, like, it's really inconsistent ethic. Like I don't think there's a way to clearly define this ethic even. It's basically like coming up with it as you go along. Like, oh, in this case, in this like individual circumstance, I'm allowed to take it. And then now, like suddenly, like no one's allowed to take it from me. I don't think it's really like an ethical principle at all. It's just someone randomly, arbitrarily coming up with these random rules that have like no connection between them whatsoever. And like with the jungle ethic, or the right skeptic. So the right skeptic is saying that there is no such thing as rights, right? Like might makes right. I guess you can sort of separate these into two different types. Either might makes right, or there is no right. So if someone actually believes that might makes right, then they wouldn't say like, oh no, I like after I've taken it from someone else, you're not allowed to take it from me anymore. Because if they truly believe that might makes right, then they would believe that the mighty has the property right, that the mighty should be able to control the property. So that if they are the mighty, then sure, they would like not give it up or anything. However, if they are the weaker person, if they are someone who can be pushed over and the stick can be taken away from them, then they are not the mighty. So if they reject that, like, oh no, you shouldn't be taking it from me, then they are no longer following the might makes right ethic. They're again like just evolving into like complete just Vim-based, some Vim-based ethic of like, oh, I'll do whatever I want. Like I think that might makes right ethic is it can be a consistent ethic. It will be a false ethic, but it can be a consistent ethic. But like, do whatever you want is not the might makes right ethic. Or like if someone else wants to take from me, that's wrong. I don't think that would be make the right effort.
So,
And with the right skeptic, if someone truly, like, consistently, sorry, can I just quickly finish this point?
Sure.
Basically, like, if someone truly believes that there is no right, like nothing is wrong, if they believe in this consistently, I think this can also be a consistent ethic, despite a false ethic. But if they actually believe in this, then they wouldn't like object to someone taking it from them as well, because that would obviously be like saying that there are rights, like I have rights over this thing. So yeah, I'll give it to you.
So like, I agree that do whatever you want isn't necessarily the same as my makes right. But they're all under the same banner of the law of the jungle, because it's all just a bunch of mystic whim-based woo-woo nonsense, which are all refuted on exactly the same grounds. So that's why I bundle them all together. To be clear, it's not a package deal, because in this context, I don't have to analyze them separately, because they're all falling on the same grounds. So for specifically the mere possessor ethic, if you have the mere possessor ethic, it's actually not the case that ownership means you're not allowed to take it from them. Because, okay, I'm not allowed to take it from them whilst they own it, but literally the split second that I have taken it from them, I own it. So I've not taken anything that they own, because I own it because I took it from them. So there is at 0 point in time, is there an instant where I'm taking something from them, which they own. Right? I am never in possession of stolen goods. So there is no such crime as theft under the mere possessor ethic. So I don't agree that a consistent mere possessor ethic is the same as the NEP at all.
Firstly, I'm not saying it's the same. I'm saying that it's similar, and the difference would be like the restitution and retribution. However, I think this is an issue of like imprecise wording, because earlier you defined ownership as the right to possess, or like the right to direct a given good, like
Can I clarify on that real quick?
And I think that. Sorry.
I just want to clarify on that real quick. So when I was talking about
Sure.
ownership there, I was using ownership within my legal theory. What does it mean? What does it actually mean? Basically. But, you know, these people are adopting some mystic voodoo legal theory. So they're going to have like whatever non-definition of ownership they want to come up with. And like sort of the whole point behind this attack on the mere possessor ethic is that they can't narrow down any sort of good definition of ownership. It's all going to be nonsense. Which is why, you know, my definition and Gonzalez's definition and DSA's definition, those are correct, because they're actually based in the correct legal theory.
Okay, I think I understand now. This is also why I want to like go over the whole concepts and definitions at the start. So, in this case, you're using the word ownership. However, you're using two different meanings of the word ownership. In the first instance of like ownership is defined as the right to direct a given scarce good. That's the objectivist definition of it. That's like our definition of it. However, later on, when you use the same word, and I don't think it's like really clear that like you're not using it in the same sense. So I think that's where the confusion came in.
Yeah, I mean, I can try and signpost that better. It's going to be very difficult as far as it comes to these nonsense people who have no real definitions of any of the words they're using. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a problem. It's like earlier, like when I gave the example of like Peikoff lecture and like the clip from Peikoff lecture on like slavery and freedom and stuff, and like Hegel's definition of them. Like, yeah, it's really hard to like the communication that's used is really difficult with like using different words and like not having a proper concepts and just like randomly passing words from words without interrogating what it actually means.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so yeah, I guess my okay, so I guess now my criticism is mostly like due to the confusion over wording, because you were switching between like the objectivist definitions and like when you're like giving examples of other legal ethics, you're using like sort of like other people's definition of the words. I think I have one more thing. Not sure if this still applies, so let me just check it over. I guess my other criticism doesn't okay, actually, I'm not sure if this still applies. Let me just like read it out. So basically, you said that if there is a dispute between A and B over who should be the one to control B, must presuppose that ownership is distinct from possession. When you said this in the video, do you mean ownership in the objectivist sense, or in the hoodoo I should have it, or something like that kind of sense?
So, in that case, A is saying that they should be the one to possess it, and B is saying they should be the one to possess it. So it's more like what you're calling the objectivist sense of ownership.
If we are like using the objectivist sense of ownership, in that ownership means the right to possess a given good, I don't think that both A and B must presuppose that ownership is distinct from possession. I think that the aggressor must presuppose that ownership is distinct from possession. But the victim, like the one who's the victim of the aggression, let's say that B tries to take a stick away from A, and that initiates an aggression. I think it's possible for A to presuppose that ownership is the same as possession in the objectivist sense, because they currently possess it, and they can also claim that they own it at the same time. I think it's the aggressor that must... Yeah, I do agree that the aggressor, B, if B wants to like forcibly take the stick away from A, who's the original owner of it, then B must presuppose that ownership is distinct from possession. Because otherwise then B would just like agree that A has... Because A currently has possession of it. So if B just doesn't presuppose this, B would just think that A would be the right person to like possess it, and B wouldn't fight over it in the first place. So I do agree with this like partially, but I don't think that it's like both A and B.
So like we have to think about what premise A is operating under. A is operating on the premise like, hey, even if this guy B is able to take it, it's mine. That's why he's fighting over it, right? He's not going to be genuinely fighting over it if he thinks, well, it doesn't really matter if B takes it or not, right? He's got to think like, hey, no, even if B's able to get this thing, I want it back, and I'm going to try and claw it back, right? That's the sort of situation which occurs with conflicts.
I don't think this is necessary. I mean, another way of thinking of it is that A currently possesses a stick, and A also wants to use a stick. Let's say that A is in the middle of using the stick for spearfishing or something. He's currently using the stick, and he currently possesses it. And let's say that he believes that possession is the same as ownership. So he also believes that he owns a stick. And he's now trying, let's say that in the middle of trying to spearfish, he comes to wrestle away from him. But obviously, like, A would care about not being able to use stick to spearfish in the moment. So I don't think this is necessarily a case about, like, what happens after if B takes it. Is that he wants to stop B from taking it in the first place, no matter what comes next.
I suppose so. That would be a very strange sort of ethic. But you are right, it is logically possible for a person to be desperately clawing onto something and, you know, fighting to death to keep it, and then the instant it's taken away from them, just go, oh, whatever.
I guess I don't have any like fundamental objections to any of these like proofs then. And I'm mainly being like nitpicky, but I hope you don't mind too much of me being nitpicky, because I do think that precision is important in philosophy. And I think it is important to be like precise in language and like the devil's in the details.
It's perfectly fine.
I guess that concludes the section on like the nature and justification on NAP. Okay, so the next so basically to summarize, I do agree with the NAP, and I do agree with these justifications, and I think it's really impressive that you were able to like come up and integrate all of these different proofs into like a singular holistic proof. And you're only like 24, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm 20, so you're like 4 years older than me and already accomplishing so much. So yeah, it's very impressive.
Well, you got 4 years to catch up then, I suppose.
I hope to try my best, but to be honest, I am kind of a lazy person, which is a trait I'm trying to fix. The next topic is okay. So I listed it as praxeology and some of the other topics from your course. So
Just real quick.
okay, so yeah.
How much longer are you wanting to go?
I mean, I do have a lot of like non-NAP related topics that I want to talk to you about, but I like plan to like save them for another day. So like, I'd love to come back on the stream again if you'd have me. So I don't mind if we cut it short. It depends on like how much time you have left. So the rest of the thing that I have planned is an estimate of how long. I'd guess between half an hour and an hour. But I obviously can cut it short, and we can like go over this another time if you want. It's mainly just praxeology and the stuff on your course, and that's it.
Sure, it was just because I was wanting
It
to go
depends
to
on
the
how much time you have
toilet.
left.
I probably wouldn't want to do it for... We could do an hour's worth if I just go to the toilet real quick, because otherwise I'll...
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll take a toilet break as well.
Alright, in a bit.
Yeah, see you in a bit then.
Alrighty. Waiting for that guy to get back.
Welcome back, Zulu.
Ah, there we go. Good timing.
Yeah, I'm here now. Okay, so when I said I want to go over praxeology in the debate, it's more of an issue of like I'm often confused of what constitutes an action and like what an action actually is and stuff like that. So I do have a lot of hypotheticals here just to like try to figure it out with examples. And so if any of them like feel repetitive, just tell me and like we can like skip through it. Okay, so I guess my first question is like the axiom of praxeology is that man acts. Is it basically saying that man is always acting and that it's not possible to be acting in any instant?
So it's saying that sort of insofar as man is doing something in his capacity as a human, that action is purposeful. It's purposeful behavior. It's sort of confusing because the objectivists use action in a different sense. Basically,
and also behavior does not count as acting.
So when an Austrian says behavior, he's more meaning any sort of ambulation, motion being done by an animal, right? And the specific thing about human action then for the Austrian is that it's got purpose behind it. It's got volition in there. There's choice being made in that action. So insofar as a human is acting as a human, he is acting purposefully. That's basically what it's saying. So, you know, it might be that there is a human body there, but then he gets shot through the head and he starts tumbling down a cliff. The sort of action of tumbling down the cliff, what a metaphysician would describe as an action at least, that's not a human action. It's not an action in the capacity as a human. That's why Austrians care about human action as against the action of a balloon floating or the action of a corpse tumbling down a cliff.
Okay. I'm still a bit confused because it sometimes feels a bit like a circular definition when you say that, well, in praxeology, action does mean human action, and you're sort of defining it as a human action.
It's sort of more like a...
I'm trying to figure out, like...
It's sort of more like a shorthand, so like, we don't want to, if we're discussing something really deep in economics, be constantly saying human action, just say action, the actions of these people. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't want, because you've already established early on that you're talking about humans specifically. You're talking about the rational animal, rational action, right?
So I'm wondering, like, with action, like, what it encompasses. For example, like, can man perform multiple actions at the same time? I know that, like, in epistemology, in objectivism, metaphysics, it says that an object, the law of causality is that an object only has, like, one action available to it at the same time. It says that, like, a man is riding on a unicycle while juggling. Like, is that one action or is that multiple actions?
So, the metaphysician, or the objectivist metaphysician specifically, they're saying that any object has one action available to it under any set of circumstances, not at the same time. So, the action possible to your arms under the set of circumstances that you've chosen to juggle is that they make that juggling motion. Assuming you know how to juggle, of course. The action available to the balls, as they contact your hand to get thrown up, is that they go in that juggling motion. The action available to your legs is that they do the leg motion and so on and so forth, right? So the metaphysician is splitting it up a lot more. Whereas when we get up into praxeology, we're using action a lot more broadly. where we've already established that, like, humans have free will and all that jazz. And so there it's just implementing means to obtain some end. So there you could describe juggling whilst riding on a unicycle as a single action, because your end might be to win the prize at the local talent fair, right? And your means to do that is juggling balls and a unicycle. So you could split that up into separate actions if you wanted, but it's not necessarily going to be useful for any sort of economic analysis you're doing to split it up. It might be useful enough to just have that be one action.
I see. Wait, so in certain circumstances, like, can man be acting, like, having two actions at the same time? Let's say he has two ends. Can he be trying to attain two different ends at the same time? Let's say that, like, sometimes what I do is that I play a mobile game while listening to a Zulu live stream or something like that. I listen to the Zulu live stream in order to become a better anarcho-objectivist. And I play the mobile game because, I don't know, I want to, like, have a dopamine hit or something like that. Would that be counting as two different actions?
So there's scarcity involved here, where you do have to make choices. So I think for the most part, it would be more useful to talk about this as a single action, i.e. the single action is what you're able to do at the moment, or rather at the same time. But I mean, there might be certain ways where it's useful to talk about it as where you split those actions off, because what's useful to keep in mind is this is all conceptual, so there's a lot of choice being made in terms of how you're splitting up the scenario depending on what sort of economic analysis you want to do based on it. Maybe you want to analyze something based on the fact that you're doing these two things at once. I mean, that's perfectly plausible. And I mean, in a lot of senses, I might have like a longer term project that I'm doing. So that's one situation where I am acting towards building a house. But that's obviously going to be a long term project as against going to the baseball game. That's going to be a much shorter term thing to do. And I can do these things concurrently. But generally you'd want to split them up to make the analysis a little bit easier.
See. So basically, it doesn't matter if you split it up or like talk about it as one action. Basically, whatever like makes the most sense and like helps the analysis become easier is the thing that you should do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so another question I have is that like in when analyzing like things using the NAP, we need to like discover that like if there's a conflict and like in a conflict, like how to like sometimes during conflict I'm wondering like how to verbalize what action each person is taking is. So conflicts is contradicting actions or like mutually exclusive actions, right? So like sometimes like I want to like identify verbally like what action A is taking, like what action A is taking and what action B is taking. And then figure out like if they're contradictory or not. And then I can do the analysis of okay, who initiated it, etc., etc. So I'm just not too sure like how to like put a sentence like a proposition on like explaining what an action is. So can you give an example like let's say you lose actions right now. How would you describe your actions currently? Like what action are you performing?
The important one would be that I am using my computer as a means to engage in a dialogue with you over Discord. Maybe I'm also taking a swig of beer at a certain point. That would be an action I'm taking concurrently with the action of engaging in the dialogue with you. So, and I mean, it might be very important to split those up if you're doing a legal analysis. Like maybe, like obviously it's going to be there's not going to be any conflict in terms of us talking. But what if I reached over and grabbed somebody else's beer and tried to take a swig from that? like that would be a conflict. So that action in particular would be engaging in conflict, but not the action of me talking to you over Discord. So you want to split it up as little as possible to do the analysis. And this is obviously not arbitrary. It's determined by the facts of the matter. We don't need to consider the fact that I was on Discord with you to talk about the fact that I then also leaned out my window and shot someone moving past, right? It would be irrelevant to talk about the fact that I was on Discord in terms of judging the law of the case. There might be some important evidence there, like maybe you heard the gunshot, right? But it wouldn't be relevant to discuss whether it was aggression or not. Is sort of my point. And also, we wouldn't need to analyze separately, like me grasping the pistol as a separate action to me opening the window and as a separate action to me pulling the trigger. Like that would be splitting it up too much.
I see. Mm-hmm. So let's say like an example of if someone comes in right now into your room and punches you in the face. So the action he's engaging with that I think is relevant to this conflict is that he's using your face for punching, right? So in this case, like what would you say is the contradiction action that you are engaging with? What are you implementing your face for?
So I'm trying to use my face for looking pretty on stream and using my mouth to talk to you. These things I can't keep engaging with. I can't keep doing what I'm doing right now if somebody's punching my face, right? That's just interfering with my body straight up. I can't keep doing what I'm doing if I'm getting punched in the face. So his action, his use of my face is not compatible with my use of my face. I would very much like my face to be unpunched, right? Whereas if I had a sign out my door which said, please come and punch me, then it's a very different story.
So the thing I'm wondering is that, like, using your face to be unpunched, like, is that technically an action? Can you describe that as an action? Using your face for the end of not being punched? Like, does that count as an action?
So I'd be using it towards some end which involves not getting punched. Like, that's how I want to employ my face, is not being punched and not being shot and not a whole bunch of other things. And generally, it would be way too much splitting up if I'm just going to the baseball game and to say, and he's trying to use his face for something other than being punched. Like, you'd be splitting up way too much. It's like, why are you mentioning that? It's not relevant. But in the case when somebody's punching my face, it becomes relevant. So you need to split up the actions to that degree, right?
Yeah, I see. I'm just wondering because, like, sometimes I feel like there might be a counter argument of saying, like, but you can be punched and talk to someone on stream at the same time, technically. It might, like, interfere with it slightly, but you're still talking to someone while you're being punched. Like, what would be the counter argument to that?
Well, it does interfere with it slightly then. I mean, I'm not like Superman here. If somebody came in and just give me a mean right hook, I'd be pretty off put by that. I don't know that I could continue just talking through that whole thing and not move my head an inch and keep staring forward and speaking to the mic at the right distance and everything. Like, that's going to cause a whole bunch of problems for me. And like, it in any case is going to interfere at least somewhat, right? And so it's interfering. So there's mutually exclusive actions there.
What about the example of, let's say that you want to give a lecture in front of a massive audience and you want to, like, appear serious in front of them. So you want to, like, you want to use your vocal cords and your face and whatnot to give a, like, low intonation and a serious voice and give the lecture in a serious voice. However, there's someone in the back of the lecture room that's, like, making silly faces and doing all sorts of, like, funky stuff and stuff. And that's making you laugh. Like, that also, like, I guess, interferes with what you're trying to use your face for, because they're making your face muscles, like, laugh and, like, making your voice go weird and, like, high-pitched laughter and stuff like that. Like, but I know that wouldn't be an aggression, but I'm trying to figure out, like, praxeologically, like, why that is not a conflict.
Sure, so it's possible for them to be making those faces and for me to not focus on that person, right? I'm making the choice to focus on that person, and I've made the evaluation, this is funny, so I'm going to laugh. I've made those choices. Whereas, I don't have any choice in the matter of me getting my head shoved to the left if somebody punches me in the head, right? I don't have any choice in that matter. It's complete. It's not volitional at all. That's the difference. Is whether, because I might abstractly, let's put it this way. I might want to learn Spanish, and then somebody says Spanish is really dumb, and then I decide not to go on Duolingo that day. They didn't initiate a conflict with me. Even if I might still want to learn Spanish, I decided to not take the steps needed to learn Spanish. I might have wanted to give a good lecture there, but I didn't take the steps needed to give a good lecture, namely tossing the guy out for making silly faces or not paying attention to the guy making silly faces. I made that choice. So it's my action to do that, even if it's against what I would have wanted.
Okay, I see now. So just like relating back to the primary choice being to focus or to drift. So like it's your choice rather than someone else causing it to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Like that clears things up a lot. Okay, so in like the your recent video, when you criticized Rand for making up those absurd like hypotheticals. You said that hypotheticals, the purpose is for checking consistency and applying them to clearly defined scenarios. Do you think hypotheticals can also be used to like better, like creating example units to better understand concepts? Like with concept formation, you are perceiving different units, and then you are taking all of these units and then drafting out like the similarities and the differences between them, and that's how you like form the concepts. Like, do you think hypotheticals can be useful for like creating examples of units so that you can like understand similarities between them, such as like what we've just been doing then of like me giving you an example of like this scenario of someone making goofy faces and the lecturer laughing, and then we can analyze that of like, okay, is this an aggression and this is not aggression, and then use it to like better understand the concept of like what is an aggression, what's the essence of it.
Yes, I think that is a valid use of hypothetical. Specifically, what I'm getting at there is that hypotheticals can never give you any new philosophy, right? So, what would it look like for a hypothetical to give you new philosophy? Let's say you don't have any sort of moral theory at all, and then you're like, okay, well, what if there was a couple of train tracks, and the train's going down one way, but I could switch it to the other way, and on one of the tracks there's one person, on all the other track there's 5 people. Should I switch it or not? And if I tried to use that hypothetical to discover some philosophical principle, that would not work. Because I'd have to already apply a philosophical principle to the railway example in order to figure out whether it's good to do that or not. Right. That is sort of the problem, is that Rand is using as an argument against anarchism, before we've established whether anarchism is good or not, she's saying, take the hypothetical of there is Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith, and they each have their own agency, and they each have their own government, and Mr. Smith says that Mr. Jones takes his wallet, and Mr. Jones disagrees with this, and then they go to war. Therefore, anarchism is bad. And it's like, no, you're trying to establish a philosophical principle based upon a hypothetical scenario. That's my disagreement with Rand there, is she's using hypotheticals as arguments rather than just to simply highlight something where you have a separate argument for it.
That Rand impression was surprisingly good. Yeah, this kind of reminds me of like the stolen concept fallacy as well. Of like, you know how like you're in hypotheticals, you're like, maybe it's not stolen concept, maybe it's just like some other like conceptual hierarchy problem. But like you're applying the principle. So like hypotheticals is when you're applying the principle to applied ethics. You need a universal ethical principle to apply to the first place. To apply in the first place.
Mhm.
So the hypothetical comes after the ethics. So the universal ethical principles is like more fundamental.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question I'm curious about is like, what are the rules of like forming a hypothetical? It's only rules that like it can't be like contradictions. So, like I know that you can't just assume. Okay, hypothetically, what if there is a square circle or something like that? Besides like contradictions, are there any other rules of like how you can construct a hypothetical for it to be valid?
Let me think about this for a moment. I haven't written down the rules for a valid hypothetical, but I know an invalid one when I see it. I think it's mostly when you're trying to get a new philosophical principle from the hypothetical that it's invalid, or if you're assuming anything, of course, like, you know, do you want to rape men or women, right? Here's a hypothetical for you: rape a man or rape a woman, which is good, you know? It's like, oh, hold on, invalid, right? I think it's I
think that violates metaphysics, right? Because man is metaphysically free, so.
Moreover, it's like a false alternative. Like I think you can commit basically any logical fallacy in the construction of a hypothetical scenario, but people generally aren't acute to them when it's presented as a hypothetical. I mean, there was that famous clip where the guy was asking the other gentleman, where he was like, "Hey, LGBT rights or the economy," or something like that. And he was like, "I reject your question." And it's like, yeah, fair. You know, that's a fair rejection. Because he's saying, no, I'm asserting that this is a false alternative. I think you can have both LGBT rights and a good economy. And it's like, and the guy who was doing the questioning, he did not understand this. He just kept saying, "I'm just asking the questions, bro." I think it was perfectly legitimate that if you think you can have LGBTQ rights and a good economy, that you should reject that hypothetical. You could say, hey, no, you've got to first establish that those are mutually exclusive. And that's the thing. You've got to be clear. You've got to be precise with building these things up. It's similar in a way to analogies, which analogies are sort of similar to hypotheticals, right? Where I'll take Steven Zapata from my AI art video, where Steven Zapata is saying, well, no, AI and photography are disanalogous, or AI and oil painting are disanalogous, because nobody was going into... it was AI and photography are disanalogous, because nobody was making cameras by taking them into oil painting galleries and taking a bunch of photos of oil paintings to train the camera how to take pictures. It's like, okay, well, yeah, sure. That's a difference you've identified there. But why is it a relevant difference? You need to first do the step of establishing the principles at play for either hypotheticals or analogies, or even e-contrarios, right? But e-contrario is the opposite of analogy. And people just don't really do the extra step most of the time. They just have a vague notion of what these tools do, and they don't apply them correctly.
Yeah, I think it'll be very useful to be able to explicitly explicate exactly the rules for analogies and hypotheticals, because right now I think it's quite intuitive to me of when an analogy is hypothetical. and then it's not. And same thing with hypotheticals. However, sometimes I find it hard to like explain to someone else who doesn't understand. With hypotheticals, I feel like a core aspect of what separates a valid hypothetical from an invalid hypothetical is in your brain page, you mentioned how the metaphysically given is immutable, however, the man-made is mutable. So I think it's a conflation between these two. For example, like if you make a hypothetical where like your only choice is to either I remember your an earlier example, like to either rape or murder someone. Like I think that would be an invalid hypothetical because like for starters, you need to give more description of like what the scenario is and why these are your only choices. Because humans are free; they have free will, so they can choose different options. So that's why there isn't only two options. That's why it's false alternative. So that in that hypothetical, that you have to do this or this. That would be a violation of the metaphysics of human nature. So that would be invalid. However, like in one of the examples I gave, I had a debate about democracy a while ago with my friends, and an argument against like democracy. It wasn't really a proper argument, just like something I threw out there. Was that like democracy is basically like allowing rights violations because like if everyone like agrees to violate rights, then rights violations go ahead, and that's what democracy is. And then they started like pushing back with like all sorts of examples of like like for example like in the UK you have like multiple parties in elections, and then you have like an opposition of that. They basically answer like that's why you have an opposition. And then I basically answered that like, okay, then hypothetically, if does that mean that if the main party like in the UK agreed to legalize rape, and the opposition was like, okay, yeah, fine, we agree with that. Does that mean that rape is now fine because both the main party and the opposition, like, hey, there's an opposition, right? And then their answer to that was basically that, like, that's not a realistic hypothetical because it will never happen that, like, everyone, okay, like, they just think that, like, it's impossible for everyone to, like, vote, everyone in the UK to vote to, for rape to be legalized. But I think that that's still a valid hypothetical because there isn't a problem with, like, the metaphysical basis. It doesn't, like, attempt to change metaphysics, and the man-made is mutable. So like I think it is still possible for like people in the UK all to collectively like vote for legalizing rape and something like that. I agree that it's really, really unlikely, but I think that for hypotheticals, really, really unlikely is valid. Such as the example of like, what if an alien comes down to Earth and like asks you to like steal a candy or like blast the Earth apart? Like, I think that would be valid hypothetical because even though it's like really, really epistemologically unlikely, it's metaphysically possible because it doesn't violate any laws of metaphysics. However, yeah, similarly, like with the UK legalizes rape example, like it's epistemologically unlikely, and also like there's no epistemological basis for it. However, metaphysically, it is possible because man has free will. So do you agree with that analysis?
Yeah, so like that's basically right, but I do want to add a caveat onto it. So I do believe it's a valid hypothetical to say, well, what if the main party and the opposition party both wanted to legalize rape? Because we already know that it's fully within the possibility of politicians that they would want to allow crime to take place. That's their entire job.
I mean, I think like in the UK, like a few decades ago, like marriage rape used to be legal. So
yeah, or like
people are like, oh no, it's impossible for rape to be legal. But,
yeah, or even like a few decades before that, when Germany, which by the way was a highly developed nation, it was a Western nation, and they were like, yeah, we're going to kill off all the Jews. So like I do believe that's a valid hypothetical, but I do want to clarify with a different example. When I was at Yalcon, there was a discussion between a gentleman named Arshad and someone called Divinity. I don't know if Divinity wants his real name out there, so I won't say it. So they were discussing about a situation where, what if you were, it was about certainty, how you achieve certainty. and it was about, well, what if you were you were in a store and you came out and someone said, hey, I know that looks like your car, but somebody actually replaced it with an identical copy of your car. Can you achieve certainty over whether that was your car or not? And so it was like, it got to the point of where it's some YouTube prankster who was like doing this, where they somehow made like a perfect car. And I believe it was Arshad's argument, which was that, well, if you have the psychology of a YouTube prankster, you're not going to have the tactfulness to make, like, I think it was your friend who was in the store with you the whole time said, hey, I know that looks like your car, but it's not your car. And they have no way of proving this or anything, to be clear. I believe it was Arshad's argument where it's like, hey, if you've got the psychology of a YouTube prankster, you're not going to be so expert that you can make a literally perfect copy of something. Like, you have to show somehow that it's possible within the psychology of such a person to achieve that. So there can be very subtle, invalid hypotheticals. But I don't believe that it's an invalid hypothetical to be like, okay, well, what if the government said rape's fine? Because governments have done that, right? That's completely within their wheelhouse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it's just really frustrating trying to, like, I think I'm not too sure how to argue with someone who just doesn't get hypotheticals and analogies. Like, because for me, like, I understand it intuitively. So when they just say that, like, okay, this analogy doesn't fall because obviously this thing is not the same thing as this. Like, I'm just not too sure how to respond to that.
Yeah, it's basically just showing that there's a difference between two things isn't enough to show a disanalogy. You have to show that the difference is relevant to the point being made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'll try to, like, highlight that point, that, like, it has to be relevant next time.
Mm.
And
yeah, on that, I go over that. I go over that quite a lot in the AI video, because there's a lot of examples of that in the
I do recall that
community.
Yeah, like this AI art, those arguments holds.
Yeah.
Actually, I find it really humorous how, like, you put in a argument for, like, what's it called? You pretended to, like, have an argument against photography, and then, like, you revealed that it was actually Stephen Zapata's argument, and I found that really funny.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh no, I don't know how that got mixed in there. Okay, so we agreed that, like, we finished within the hour. How urgently do you have to leave, or are you fine for us going to, like, 12 o'clock?
I'm fine with going to 12 o'clock. I don't like doing too long streams.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Okay, so we've got, like, 20 minutes left. Let's say 15 minutes. So we have, like, 5 minutes to round off. Okay, I'll just try to follow along with, like, the list of questions I want to ask. So, going back to, like, praxeology. One thing I'm wondering is that, like, with action, well, for starters, like, action is using a scarce good to achieve a desired end, right? So let's say that someone believes in the primacy of consciousness, and then they pray to the volcano gods for the volcano to stop erupting. Are they, like, if they're just, like, thinking in their head thinking of a prayer in their head, is that actually using any scarce good? Like, because consciousness is not an entity. However, your body is. However, your consciousness requires your body to exist. So are you actually using your body, or are you just using consciousness? So, like, is praying to the volcano god an action?
So there is a scarcity involved, namely that you can only think of so many things at the same time, right? This goes back to the Crow limit. So that would be the scarcity here, is that you're trying to achieve some end using, at the very least, what you're focusing on. You're focusing on the thought of the volcano god, and maybe even you're doing a little dance to get his attention, and you're clasping your hands together, and you're, like, screaming out a song, at him. You know, there are a whole bunch of like physical entities that you could use, but at the very least, there is a scarcity involved in what you're thinking about. Because even, you know, quote unquote inaction is still an action in the Austrian sense. Like, you know, kneeling down in front of a volcano, you can't do that and also go see the Dodgers at the same time. You know, those are incompatible things. You can't do them both.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Yeah. I think understand that explanation for why that prayer is an action. Okay. The other question is like going back to like intention and stuff. Is the difference between action and behavior purely a difference in the mind? Like, are there any observable physical differences of the difference between action and behavior? So let's say that, like, you know how if you hit someone's knee, their legs twitch out. You can also like fake it, I guess, fake a leg twitching out. So my question would be like, is there any like difference in the action between like basically like, when someone pretends to have a leg twitch and kick out, and actually had a behavior, not an action, of like they didn't voluntarily kick that leg out. Are there like physical observations to it, or is the difference between action and behavior purely like something that in the mind that's subjective?
So, on the first level, it would be the difference is whether you chose it or not. Now, whether you can observe that and to what degree you can observe it depends heavily on your level of technological development. Like if you hit somebody's knee and they kicked it out whilst they're in an MRI, that's going to look very different to them choosing to kick their leg out, right? Like different areas of the brain will start lighting up. And I mean, even more primitively than MRIs and whatnot, you could also, you know, maybe attach some electrodes into the leg to see whether the signal is being sent by the brain. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know if this is true. You could also see whether they're being hit with a hammer or not, if you want to go real primitive with it. And also just like which muscles are doing the motion, because it'll be only very specific muscles which do the motion when it's actually like the involuntary reflex as against them choosing to do it. It's like there's that House episode where it's the girl who's got CIPA, chronic insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis, where she's like so Foreman touches her with like an alcohol rag to clean up her wound, and she flinches into it, and he's like, well, hey, people who actually feel pain, they flinch away from things, lady, so you can't feel pain. You know, there. I don't. Again, not a doctor. I don't know if that's actually how you do that. But yeah, there are observations of that sort that you could make. So it's in principle observable whether somebody actually chose to do something or not. I mean, that's what the whole field of criminology is based on, determining whether they did the thing or not. But like what specifically that would entail in some specific circumstance, you'd need more specifics, right?
Yeah, okay, I understand now. So I guess maybe I can answer my own hypothetical now. So let's take the case of like two different cases. One of if a man pretends to like have a leg twitch and kick his leg out, and which basically trips someone over, compared to if, let's say that they just have a condition where their leg twitches and they kick out sometimes involuntarily and they kick somewhere over. So in this case, like if there are, let's say that there are no cameras or anything, and obviously like you can't analyze their brain or anything, and there's probably not going to be any witnesses that are actively focused on paying attention to what's happening in that instant. The legal analysis here would be that metaphysically, if they did do it on purpose, then this is a crime. However, epistemologically, it will be impossible to actually figure it out. Would that be correct?
So, I mean, it might be, to be clear, it might be impossible to prove that they did it deliberately. But because the burden of proof is on the positive claimant. The burden of proof would be on proving that they had this intention to do it. But like, I mean, some of the things you could do to actually figure this out is maybe you bring a doctor and be like, hey, is there such a thing as this condition where people twitch like this? He goes, yes. Can you confirm that this guy has this condition? Yes. Does it look like this is the condition doing this? And he's yeah. You know, you have like some sort of expert witness who is able to be like, yeah, look, this, I know what it looks like when people are faking this. He doesn't look like he's faking this. You know, that type of thing you could use to figure out whether or not they're faking it. But it would always be the bird innocent until proven guilty, which is just another form of the fact that the burden of proof is on the positive, right? Because you are literally innocent until you're proven that you're guilty.
Okay, yeah, I understand now. Okay, so I want to this like leads into mens rea and actus reus. So both cases, this will be an actus reus, right? Like if you kick out and like trick someone over. Would it be correct in saying that, like?
So if it was completely involuntary, where you had no choice over your leg twitching out like that, then it wouldn't actually be a guilty action. It wouldn't be actus reus, because that wouldn't be an action in the sense which law cares about, which is it's not chosen. I see. Actus reus cares only about those human actions where, you know, maybe you're walking along and you accidentally step on someone's sunglasses, right, and break them. There's actus reus there. There is a guilty action, but no mens rea. You didn't see the sunglasses and go, I'm going to stomp on those, right? That's the distinction going on here.
Okay. Wait, so like if someone is like sleepwalking or something, and then they are a sleepwalker, and then they like hurt someone or something like that, like punch someone while sleepwalking or shoot someone while sleepwalking. In that case, they can't be held legally responsible anyway. Like there's no you would say that there's no actus reus in those cases. So there's obviously no punishment.
Yeah, assuming
that means that there'll be no restitution either.
Yeah. Assuming that, I mean, there might be restitution involved if they're like being negligent, like if they know that they're like asleep, shoot their gun out type of person, and they don't lock their gun away, and they like leave it like enticingly on their bedside table. Maybe you could argue that they were being negligent. Obviously that would depend on the specific circumstances. And I'm just going to assume that like sleepwalking is you just have no choice over it whatsoever. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, I don't know. Not a doctor. But yeah, if it's literally you had no choice in the matter, you weren't being negligent, nothing you could have done. Like this is just, you had like a disease that day where you didn't even know that you had this disease, but it made you go out and your body made the motion of shooting someone and you killed the person, then it wouldn't be your fault. I think a good way to explain this might be, have you seen the show Stargate?
No, I haven't. Is it good?
Oh, it's the best sci-fi show ever. Everybody should watch it. Most of these sci-fi shows, they're like, oh no, we got this prime directive. We can't interfere with these primitive civilizations. Or it's like, you know, Star Trek again, where it's like some fucking alien civilization has to come in and save us. No, Stargate negates all that. It's like, no, we're going to go out there and we're going to blow the fucking aliens up. And we're going to arm the primitive civilizations to blow more aliens up and all that lovely stuff. It's great. But in this show, there's this race of aliens called the Goa'uld, where they're like parasites which infect your brain and they can control your body, right? So if you're infected with a Goa'uld parasite, it's your body doing those things, but you are not guilty of those actions. They were not your actions. They were the Goa'uld's actions.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so like that's sort of the distinction there. You have to choose the action. And to be clear, you don't have to believe that your action was guilty. Like the Nazi prison guard who shoots the escaping Jew, he has both actus reus and mens rea. even though he thought his action was fine, he deliberately engaged in the action which isn't fine. That's another important point. As against, he was just out shooting and somebody ran in front of his gun.
Yeah, okay, I understand this now. So, to give an example, wait, so to use what you just said, if he was shooting and someone ran in front of his gun, would that be actus reus?
So it'd be, yes, it would be actus reus. There would be, there is literally a guilty action involved there. You did initiate conflict. Unless the person was like deliberately trying, like if you were about to shoot and they like grab the gun towards their face and you're already pressing down on the trigger, in that case it wouldn't be your action, right? So you have to take like severe precautions to make sure that like nobody's getting in there. But it would be sort of more like there's an easier example would be maybe you're out hunting and you see something furry moving in the woods and you're like, oh, that must be a deer, and you shoot at it, and then you go over and check and it's somebody dressed in a perfect deer replica costume. You're like, Jesus Christ. You did literally...
In the hunting range. Not a smart idea.
You did literally murder that person, but you weren't intending to murder a person, right? You weren't intending to kill a person, right? That's the difference between the Nazi and you, is the Nazi was literally intending to gun that Jew down, and that is criminal. You were intending to gun a deer down, and the bullet hit a person. Unfortunately so. So, I mean, the only and that's where, things like negligence come into question, and that's where, as Kinsella puts it, the armchair kind of goes away. Because as far as jurists are concerned, we can't explicate literally every possible example. At a certain point, you've got to just get a judge in there where it's a literal example before you rather than a hypothetical, right?
I mean, I think that if you include all the relevant details, you should still be able to come to a judicial conclusion, right, as a judge. If you know the law, like you can apply it if you have enough information. So as long as the hypothetical can satisfy like providing all the necessary information to deal with the case, then I think you should be able to like come up with the correct judicial decision.
Sure, but the point is that hypotheticals, they're going to be all very cleanly defined, whereas actual situations, and this is like the error a lot of people make with the continuum situation, all the jurist can say is like, hey, it's aggressive if it is initiating conflict. This is David Friedman's example, I believe, where if you shine a flashlight at someone's door, it's probably not aggression. Yeah. But if you shine like a 10 gigawatt laser at their door and burn their house down, it probably is aggression. So at what point does it become aggression? The jurist just says it's aggression at the point at which it initiates conflict. The judge can look at an actual specific example, a specific case in front of him, and try to apply this principle. Okay, was conflict initiated or not? Right? Because he's not doing the same job as the jurist. The jurist is just giving you general principles. The judge is applying those general principles to a specific case.
Yeah, okay. It kind of reminds me of like in the Discord a few days ago, they'll talk about giant lasers, giant space lasers. And you were debunking them as like transformer explosions and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a clean example, but I think it will be a common like scenario. So or at least a plausible scenario of like if someone gets a heart attack in the middle of a shop, and then when they get a heart attack, they like fall over and they crash into like, let's say, a really, really expensive statue or anything like that, and they break it. That means that they don't have to pay any damages, and it's the owner of the statue that needs to like spend the money to fix it themselves. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I would say to the owner of the statue, didums fucking protect your statues better.
Yeah, okay, I think I understand this now. Okay, so to go back to the not killing the Jew example, I think in your course the example you used was like a hiker wandering into like a farmer's land without doing it on purpose. That would be an example of actus reus, because he did intentionally walk there. However, it would be mens rea because it wasn't on purpose. He didn't know that it was the farmer's land. And the Nazi like intentionally like shot like murdered the Jew, even though he thought like it was right or something, but he intentionally committed murder. I'm still not too I don't quite understand like what exactly the difference is. It's like, as for the similarities, the hiker thought that the land was unknown. Like the hiker purposely walked onto, put his foot on this specific plot of land. He thought that this land was unknown, but it actually was owned, and it was owned by the farmer. In the case of the Nazi shooting the Jew, the Nazi thought that the body of the Jew did not belong to the Jew. The Nazi thought that the Jew's body belonged to the German state or something. So I feel like this is the similarities between them. So I'm wondering if you can elaborate, like, what is the exact difference between these two scenarios that makes one rare and the other one not?
So the difference is that in the case of the hiker, it's just, it doesn't even enter in their mind that there is a conflict at hand here. Like, they don't even realize that they think that they're perhaps being somewhat negligent, because any proper property claim, it has proper signposting and everything. But like, maybe they got turned around and they thought that this was like a public right of way, through some land. But it was actually not. It was just their fuck up. They were like really tired or whatever, whereas with the Nazi, they were deliberately killing that Jew, and they knew, yep, I am killing this Jew. I feel like this is fine because Adolf Hitler said so. So the difference is that they know if they were being, if we could go into their minds and say, yeah, so you agree that you were initiating conflict with this Jew. They'd be, yeah, of course I was initiating conflict with this Jew. If you properly explained it and everything. And they just think that that's fine because the Juden is evil or whatever, right? That's the difference. It's not. It's not about
this argument.
Sorry.
Because they make the argument of it's impossible to initiate conflict against the Jew because the Jew just cannot engage. It's like killing a pig. If you're killing a pig, you're not initiating a conflict against the pig. Is that a valid argument for the Nazi to make that? I don't think it is a conflict to kill a Jew. The Jews are just like pigs; they've got no rights and stuff.
So that's a very good point. Where I'll have to walk back what I was saying. So I think it's more like then that they were deliberately doing the thing which we already have separately identified as being licit. Whereas the hiker is just sort of walking. He's not deliberately engaging in any action with respect to the farmer's field. He's just walking. He's sort of like not paying attention.
He's using his foot to tread on it, right?
But he's not paying attention to where his feet are going.
Using the foot to tread on it.
Like, this is like, when you, it's muscle memory. Once you learn how to ride a bike, you can just ride a bike forever. Same thing with walking. He's not literally deliberately going, that specific field there, I'm going to go through it. Right? And I'm going to plow straight through that field. That's trespassing. But just kind of mens rea trespassing, that is. Whereas if you're just kind of walking along, not paying attention, and then you accidentally stepped over somebody's property boundary, that's very different.
Wait, so if someone is on autopilot and like drifting instead of focusing, are they still acting in that case?
They might be acting in certain respects, but not others. So they might be acting to walk to the shops, but not acting with respect to each individual step they take. Right? This is the thing about how much do you split up the actions.
I think I understand now.
Whereas if they were walking along and they saw a pair of glasses and they're like, I'm going to stomp that, then they suddenly start acting with respect to the individual step of stomping down on the glasses. Right? It's about what they're focusing on.
Okay. I understand now. Thank you. It's at 12 o'clock already. I only have 3 more questions. It's all on the same topic of mens rea and actus reus. I'm just it should be fast. But if you need to go now, I completely understand. I'm just wondering if you'd like to finish the last 3 questions.
We can do the last 3.
Yeah, I'll try to make them quick. So okay, I'll just start with probably the easiest and probably the one we can move on from the quickest. If someone coerces you by saying, steal this person's candy or I will kill you, it's still mens rea if you like go ahead and kill the person, right?
If you steal a candy, that is.
Oh, sorry, if you go ahead and steal the candy, sorry, if you go ahead and steal the candy, it's still mens rea.
Yeah.
If you're being forced to do it under the threat of murder, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. The second one is, let's say that you are a pickpocket and you steal money from people in the streets, and then you had just picked someone's pocket and you took their wallet, and then you discovered that was actually your wallet that they have actually stolen from you a few minutes earlier. Is there mens rea or actus reus here in this case?
So I don't think you can have mens rea without hold on, let's think about this real quick. So there is no guilty action there. You're allowed to take that wallet.
Yep.
But do you have a guilty mind? I mean, it would be basically impossible to prove in a court of law. But I suppose you do. You have demonstrated that you think it's fine.
Metaphysically speaking,
right? So you have demonstrated that you think it's fine to steal from people. So yeah, I think you can have mens rea without actus reus. At least in this case, as you didn't know that was your wallet.
In this case, like, let's say that there's
hold on,
the money in it all cost like.
I just thought about something else. So I'm trying to think about what the retribution would be, and it would be the criminal taking your wallet back, but that can't be it because they've already demonstrated that they think it's fine to take the wallet from you. So the mens rea would essentially just cancel out completely. So I don't think it's useful at all to talk about mens rea in a situation where there is no actus reus.
Well, like, if you've demonstrated that you're fine with pickpocketing, is a third party allowed to like homestead the right to, take that money away from you? Is a third party allowed to homestead that punishment right?
So specifically, that happens when there is no living heir who can come along, or if they traded it off or whatever, or abandoned it or whatever, right? So I'll take the example of murder, where if you have no living heirs, nobody alive in your family or any friends or whatever, and I kill you, somebody can come along and homestead the right of retribution and take me to court and be like, hey, this guy's a fucking murderer. We got to get him out of our community. Like, bring him to justice, And they can do actions to homestead that right, and then they become the holder of the retribution, right? But it wouldn't be that just any old sod can come along and do that. There has to not be an heir present, right? Otherwise, you could have a sort of guardianship over the retribution until the heir can be found. And generally, the heir would be next of kin, right? That's the social norm there.
Okay, so in this example, there would be no actus reus or mens rea or any punishment. It would just be, it'll be even though you intended to like steal an innocent person's money in the first place, it actually turns out the same as if you knew that he stole your money and you were just taking it back. would that be the same scenario, like legally speaking?
Yeah, I think so. Apart from the fact that I don't think you could take 2 eyes for an eye there. I think it would only be 1 eye for an eye, just returning it all to normal. So to clarify, 2 eyes for an eye comes from if somebody.
Right, so it's like restitution and retribution.
Yeah. So that's basically just taking restitution and negating your own right of retribution.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Okay, I get where this is the case now. So I guess you can say that like both retribute against each other, and it just cancels out because like if you take 5 and I take 5, yeah, it's the same. Yeah. Okay. Okay, and the last question is, I was originally going to use a rape example. I'd like to use punching examples right now because I don't know. Sometimes when I use rape examples, people get mad at me. So like, if you punch someone, but it turns out they wanted to be punched, have you committed an aggression? Like, if someone's actually thinking, I sure hope I get punched right now. I really love that. They don't communicate it in any way. Like, they're just going about their day, just thinking about it in their minds. There's no way you can actually figure this out. But like, let's say that you're just really angry and you want to punch someone, and you just punch him across the face. But he doesn't actually mind his face being used in this way. Is there an aggression here, or is there like no mens rea or actus reus?
So I'm actually going to switch it back to rape, because a friend of mine has already made a handy dandy little chart here.
Ooh, I love this chart.
based on whether or not it's fine. And I agree with this. If you are, if you're
it's on stream right now, or is that?
Yeah, I threw it up on stream.
No. Do you think you can put it on stream?
Yeah, if you are sort of, he distinguishes into consent given as against consent received, where you're fine with it happening, but they don't pick up on it, which is sort of like, it's this situation of mens rea with actus reus, where it kind of just cancels itself out. Like, you can't do anything with it, so you just drop it completely. Or it could be the situation of the willing sex, right, which is the same sort of situation. And I do believe this captures all of the different examples that you could have.
Yeah, just literally like walks through all 4 columns and gives all possible permutations. Which includes like the impossibility ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, this chart is very helpful. Yeah, that answered a lot of my questions. Thank you. I guess that's it for the topics for today. Didn't have time to quite go into like indirect aggression and contract theory, home setting, and children's sites and stuff. But if you're free some other time, like I'd love to go on your stream again. How do you think about this stream? Like, obviously, like I've been a fan of yours for a long time, so today did not disappoint. But wondering if you can give me a bit of feedback on my performance and how compared to some of the others.
Yes, I certainly enjoyed it. I got a super chat, so that's always handy. Not the highest viewership ever, but I mean, I don't really care. I enjoyed the conversation, so whatever. I definitely want to have you back on. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. It's getting pretty late now, so I guess I'll just say goodbye and wish you a good night. Absolutely. I'll see you next time. Bye. Yep. Alrighty, and boop, and boop.